episode 2 of season 3 of the Black Ibis Social Club. How you guys doing tonight? Well, I hope everybody's well. We do have a guest today, and that is Mr. Jason McGinty. What's up, Jason?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Welcome. Hey, welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
We love having you here. I mean, you're here every single week because you're always hanging out in the chat, so it's a great time. If you guys notice, Fisto's not here, and that's because his internet is not working very well. I guess there's a Verizon outage in the Southeast. It affected us, but we're not on Verizon, and it hit him pretty hard in Florida. He doesn't think he's going to try to join us as soon as it hopefully goes on. He might join us on the chat through his cell phone around 7:30, but we'll see. So if you have any questions for Fisto, he will see them. Yeah, welcome, Jason. Last time you were on was in July. I was looking back through our old episodes, and I was like, oh, man, it's been a while since you... It feels like you were here like a week ago, basically. But
yeah, I'm here in spirit every week in the chat. So
yeah, the spirit of Jason over the world of the Black Ibis. So before we start, nothing too exciting has happened in my world since last week, except, all that stuff I don't really want to talk about on the news. I'm so fatigued with it. But
that's why I decided to do history, because that way I don't have to keep up with the news cycle.
I know it's so tedious, right? Because it's like it's impossible to make an opinion about something because there's so much misinformation, and we're just constantly just bombarded with all type of negativity and just darkness, and it gets really tedious really, really quick. I like those weeks where we do an episode and there's just nothing to talk about in the news. I'm just like, I have nothing to talk about, Yeah. But I like look how wild the news cycle is. I feel like last episode, the big thing in the news I just didn't really want to talk about, even though we talked about it, was the whole Venezuela raid, and that got kicked out of the news in like a day, and it got replaced by the Minnesota stuff, and it's just like, wow, like the news cycle is so crazy, and I don't know if you remember in the internet discourse sometime last year, there was this like lull for a while. It was like nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens. I kind of want to go back to that. I kind of want to get back to nothing ever happens, because this is not what I want. But for listeners live and tomorrow and days to follow, Jason McGinty he was a previous guest, but what he is he's a historian, and he has his own podcast, and it's more of not a discussion show like this one, but it's a history show, and it focuses on Kansas and Kansas pre-Civil War. Right? We did a whole episode on Jason's podcast, and it's wonderful. It's some of the most interesting history in the United States that you don't really know about unless you go looking for it, or you're probably from Kansas. So I'm going to let you reintroduce yourself to people that are, maybe not familiar with your work on Substack and on your podcast. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so I'm Jason. I'm the host of the Unsung podcast, the Unsung Substack. So I, like Alex was saying, I do a history podcast. So I actually started off with pre-Civil War Kansas, talking about that, and then I moved on into the Civil War era during the Civil War. So I'm about to release the final part of the series, which covers Jesse James after the Civil War. So Jesse James was a Missouri bushwhacker during the Civil War. Excuse me, sorry. And ended up leading an outlaw gang after the war, and was, definitely the most famous outlaw in American history, possibly except for Billy the Kid, but he's up there. So that goes out tomorrow morning, actually. So that's part 11 of a series that's, I actually just counted it up today. It's 47 hours and 23 minutes long total. So you got some
That's awesome.
plenty to binge on if you want to go listen to that.
Yeah.
Um,
I listened
so
to most of it, and it's fantastic for you guys that love history and love American history and enjoy history from the 19th century, pre-Civil War, during Civil War, and you're probably going to get to post-Civil War. I'm going to guess.
yeah,
It's fantastic.
yeah, yeah. So I started with
Got a
Bleeding
question for you
Kansas
because
before the Civil. Wait, sorry. Do we have
go
a
ahead.
lag? We
Go
might
ahead.
have a
I was
lag.
going to go on a tangent, but you finish.
Yeah. So I started off with Bleeding Kansas pre-Civil War, then moved on into the Civil War in Missouri and Kansas. And it ends up focusing mostly on Missouri from about episode 5 or 6 onwards, because that's where most of the fighting was going on. And now I just finished the war in the last episode, and now moving on into the post-war years. So yeah, Missouri was chaos during the Civil War. Like, you think of the Civil War being, all these major battles back east, but it was really in Missouri, it was much more of a proper Civil War, if you know what I mean. Like, neighbors turning on neighbors and total chaos. Nobody knows which side anybody's on. Like, it was a real nightmare. So that's what I cover in a big chunk of the series. So it's a part of the Civil War that you don't necessarily hear about very much.
Right, because when we usually learn about the Civil War, we're talking about the big armies on Virginia and here in South Carolina and these areas. But I guess you're right. That's such a great way to describe it. Like, the Missouri fighting was really between neighbors. It was Missouri and Kansas for the most part, right? If correct me if I'm wrong, but these are states where in these territories and states where people weren't really like on a side in the same way that like they weren't like solidified. There wasn't as concrete as somebody living in, like, let's say Boston was a northerner Yankee and
Yeah.
somebody living in Charleston, right? Like, these people were from communities from both the north and the south, kind of shoved together, and it caused a lot more neighbor upon neighbor kind of fighting than you have in other locations.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kansas was much more uniformly
Oh no, grabbing
Union in
lag.
their allegiances, but Missouri was super divided when the war started. Like, you had radicals on both sides, you had moderates in the middle, just trying to get by. So yeah, it was like everybody was in a pretty chaotic mix. So that's what I think that Americans don't exactly conceive of Civil War in general in a realistic way because of how ours went down along regional lines. Um, I think I don't know this for certain, but I think most civil wars throughout history are much more like Missouri than they were like the Eastern Civil War, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the Civil War we always bring up on this podcast just because it's mine and Fisto's favorite is the Spanish Civil War, and that would be a lot more similar to what you're describing, where it's neighbors versus neighbors and that whole sort of thing. So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I do have one question for you about like the perception of kind of like a pop media perception of Civil War and post Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of, because you're doing a thing on Jesse James now, and Jesse James is a kind of a Wild West icon. We're talking about that. Um, in a lot of books and movies and that type of thing, you have this kind of a stereotype or a archetype of the former Confederate soldier becoming a cowboy thing. Where does that come from? Is there accuracy to that, or
Well, so most of the bushwhackers, and when I say bushwhackers, I mean like Confederate Allied partisans. So they were kind of loosely affiliated with the Confederacy. They were not proper Confederate soldiers exactly. most of those guys actually settled down and lived peaceful lives after the war. Like they were given actually fairly generous terms by the Union Army at the end of the war. And basically one of the general that was in charge at the time basically told them, come in and surrender and you'll be pardoned as far as military law goes for whatever you did during the war, even though throughout the war, neither side was taking prisoners. Like they were executing people, taking scalps, like mutilating corpses. Like it was extreme stuff. And despite all of that, this Union general, Grenville Dodge, who was in charge at the time, just gave them amnesty if they just turn themselves in and surrender. So most of them ended up doing that. You had a few, including Jesse James, his brother Frank, and some of their friends. Basically, is maybe a couple dozen guys at the most that I know of who ended up either not surrendering, or they did surrender and then reverted to outlawry afterwards. So I think it's like when it comes to Jesse James, he's really like he transcended his origins. Like today, he became almost a Robin Hood figure. And you can listen to the last episode for the full version of this, but he became a Robin Hood figure in American mythology. And that's for a variety of reasons. But it's like mythological what he became. And
Right.
so it's connected to the war, but it's bigger than that, if that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely. And, it's interesting when you talk about, the Civil War is in a way the crucible of the West, like, of course we had the West before the Civil War, but when we think about the West, we think of it as a post-Civil War thing. I mean,
Yeah.
in books and movies and video games like Red Dead Redemption and its sequel, and almost everything, it's post-Civil War, and you have a lot of times you have these guys that were, former soldiers, whether they're Union soldiers or Confederate soldiers going west, and they're tangling with becoming, some of them becoming criminals, some of them becoming lawmen, some of them becoming lawmen and criminals at the same time, like in Tombstone and that type of thing. And it's a really very interesting thing. And I think that a lot of times that from a literary perspective, the European fantasy writers, European like writers tend to focus in on the medieval period or the early modern period as their kind of foundational mythology in a way, while really American like mythology really belongs in the Wild West, in the Southwest, Southeast, and then that whole kind of transition of going west. And it's I don't think it's really, I guess it's the best captured in writers like Cormac McCarthy with Blood Meridian, and it's just really interesting. It's the West in the Civil War, like the true American, like kind of core mythological concepts that a lot of contemporary political opinions and movements come out of that,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
even to this day, we are still very much affected by these elements, stuff like John Brown and the Outlaws and the Antebellum South, and just so much of that historical era influences the kind of conceptual backbone of American mythology. Of course, the World War II and post World War II and post war kind of reinvention of America is our key contemporary mythology, but we still haven't shed or abandoned the Civil War era mythology. And I find that very interesting. This is why I think it's very important to fully understand the pre-Civil War, post-Civil War, the Reconstruction, and the different elements that happened at that time. And we kind of, at least in your high school level, early college level history classes. We kind of like poo-poo through Reconstruction and the post-Civil War kind of stuff, and we don't understand what exactly is going on in any of those things. You know, we even like kind of speed run really up until World War II, to be honest, right? The whole like it's like when the
Yeah.
Civil War ends, and then we just speed run to World War II because that's what people want to talk about. You know, they want to talk about Hitler and they want to talk about, you know, Stuka dive bombers and you know that whole kind of exciting thing, you know, but there's a lot of very interesting stuff that we leave, and without that we fully don't understand the context of that. I mean, I was thinking the other day about, you know, that book you know, To Kill a Mockingbird, right? And To Kill a Mockingbird is interesting because it, you know, takes place in the South. I think it's in Alabama, if I'm correct. Maybe, I don't know, right?
I don't remember. I
But
haven't read it since high school.
well, it's a very okay. So it's a high school book. We read it in high school, right? And I can see right now there's like 30 people in the chat groaning internally, like Alex is going to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, you know, like one of the most like heavy-handed kind of like, you know, progressive novels that's put upon our children in high school, right? But you know, if you guys remember, right? Um, what's her name? Who wrote it? What's her
Harper Lee.
name? Harper Lee, right? She, right before her death, she basically put out like a sequel to the To Kill a Mockingbird, and that sequel was actually very, very interesting. I don't know. Have you read any of it or heard anything from it?
No, I've heard it's quite a bit different from the original, though.
Right. So the sequel is actually not so much as a sequel, it's more of a stuff that was left out. Right? It was stuff that was not in the original, like that was put in, you know, she wrote. It's basically like her version of a Silmarillion, all right, where basically she wrote a lot of stuff and then her editor, you know, basically pulled the To Kill a Mockingbird story out of this greater like work that she did, right? And what's interesting was some of the things that were left out. And there's one very key element thing. So everybody knows in To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout is the main character, but she's a little girl. And the whole point of the novel is she's uh, idealizing her father, Atticus Finch. And Atticus Finch is a lawyer. He's a Southern lawyer, but he is like the kind of like fundamental progressive in a way, or he is the Southern gentleman progressive, right?
Is he the original
Because
Hicklib?
well, you know, that's the thing is though, that's the kind of the idea at first, right? You think that he's a Hicklib, right? But you know, he is this guy that he's a man of principle, right? A man of honor and a man of principle and all this stuff, right? But he's also kind of a badass, right? I mean, there's this whole scene in the book that we all remember. Probably the one scene that all the kids remember is the scene where he shoots the dog, right?
Mhm.
So like this if you guys have not read the book or you can't remember, there's a scene where a rabid dog is coming down the street and this dog has got rabies and it's obviously like foaming at the mouth, it's got the crazy hydrophobia and it's kind of creeping down the street and everybody's freaking out because oh no, there's this rabid dog coming down, you know. And everybody's kind of freaking out, nobody knows what to do about it. Atticus, you know, he puts on his glasses, the movie version, he's quite the baller in that movie. He goes inside, he comes out with his rifle and he like one shots this thing, right? So not only is he this like intellectual lawyer, but he's also, you know, kind of a gangster, right? He's kind of got some skills there, right? And you know, he does in a way, he's kind of this like proto Hicklib in a way, like progressively his ideologies, right? Because he stands up for the black man who is wrongfully accused. He basically calls out his neighbors as being like, you know, he chooses to go outside his own tribe because it was the right thing to do. That's kind of the idea behind it, right? Which is the echo of that is what you get in a lot of at least the fantasy of that is what you get a lot in the whole Minnesota stuff, right? Is that like, I'm going to reject my tribe because they're wrong, so I'm going to support somebody else because whatever, right? That's kind of the fantasy that I believe a lot of these people have. But when you read Harper Lee's like addendum to that, and you get more of the backstory on Atticus Finch, so you know what Atticus Finch was?
What was he?
He was a Klan member.
Oh, right. Really? I didn't know that.
So in the greater Harper Lee one, not One Flew Over the Nest, To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He was a member of the, he was a member of the Klan, and he was in the Klan with the girl's dad. Right. And I think that, changes a lot of kind of the onus of hic liberty or progressiveness. And of course, that was left out by the editors, and it was put back in her, the sequel basically, which is more of a prequel. It's like Scout remembering more stuff about her dad, but it's a very interesting stuff here, right? Because he was very much dedicated to his legal practice and the law over any type of like tribal alliances, but he did not believe in tribal alliances because he was a member of the Klan. Interestingly enough, I don't know, I thought that was a very interesting thing, but this was an idea that like it's all tied into, right? The whole point of me bringing this up was that there's this huge kind of historical mythological element that comes from the Civil War all the way to today, and we still address these things, and we're still kind of dealing with the same kind of currents that came from then all the way to 2025, which is fascinating, which is why, for example, your podcast is important to have that full kind of understanding of the situation. But yeah, for all you guys at home, I highly recommend Jason's podcast if you're interested in history. All right. Well, let's move on and let's get to our main topic, right? So I wanted you back because I want to talk about history, and I want to talk about history for the past and for the future and how we can move forward with history. And I wanted you specifically for two reasons, right? Well, one, because we're friends and we chat every day almost, but because, and for you guys that are listening, we do have a private Black Ibis Social Club chat that you can join. If you become a subscriber, to the podcast, you'll get an email that has a little link that will take you to our chat if you want to join us. And you guys are all welcome to do so. But what I really want to talk about, you have two traits that I really want that are important. One, you're an convert to Orthodox Christianity, and two, you're a history guy, right? You're an American convert and into history, and the history of the Orthodox Church mixed with the Orthodox Church in America, as in where we are going as a church, as a people. Does Orthodoxy belong in America? Is Orthodoxy too Russian, too Greek, too Romanian for America? Those are really interesting topics, right? And I wanted your opinion on that because this is a topic that has been kind of in the background, kind of a constant background in circles in my personal life right now. Like a lot of people are talking about, are we too Russian? Are we too Greek in our liturgy? Are we too Russian in our liturgy? And will the Orthodox Church ever, become American, or do we even want to become American, right? So before we start, if you don't mind, do you want to like tell us like how you became Orthodox? I'm kind of interested in that if you want to share that. If not, it's okay though.
Well, I became Orthodox because I actually I think we mentioned Jordan Peterson the last time I was on, and he was kind of the gateway for me. It was like him plus Jonathan Peugeot kind of led me down the path. But so I grew up evangelical, non-denominational Protestant, like full blown speaking in tongues, rolling on the floor, all that kind of stuff. I grew up in that, kind of deconverted from that and became an atheist for a while in my 20s. And then, you know, by the grace of God, got out of atheism because that was a dead end. So yeah, I kind of came by way of Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Peugeot, and then eventually I had been looking into it for a while, and then I had a mutual friend tell me that he had a girl to introduce me to. I was in my late 20s. I was still single, and he's like, "Oh yeah, she's Orthodox." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's meet her." So that was like, so I knew I was going to meet her, and then I was like, maybe I should go visit an Orthodox church actually, since I've been kind of interested in this for a while. So I went to visit a church. Ended up marrying her. She's my wife now, and I kind of converted, went through catechism while I was engaged, or while we were dating, while I was engaged, and then I got baptized, and then 2 months later got married, and here we are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, how many guys like went to church for the first time because some other guys like, hey man, come over. There's some girl I want you to meet, and you're like, yeah, whatever, dude. I'll totally go to church. And then you go there and you're like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. I guess I'll convert with the fervor, the double fervor.
Yeah.
That's a great story, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
And
now
I love.
we now have a 2-year-old, and we have another baby on the way in this spring. So I think it turned out pretty well.
Right. That's awesome. That's amazing. And so you're if you said Jordan Peterson, John Piaget, that means you're relatively newer to Orthodoxy in the last decade or so, correct?
Yeah, just 3 years. I just converted I was baptized just over 3 years ago.
Okay, that's awesome. Which is perfect because I I often like I said last episode, and we were talking. I feel you know to talk about Orthodoxy in America. I feel like I am not usually the best person. I wish Fisto was here, but I'm not the best person because one, I'm not American, and two, I've been Orthodox all my life. To me, it's while I was a non-practicing Orthodox for a good, I don't know, 30 years, to be fair, it was still something that like I never found it weird. When I went, we started going back to church again. I was like, oh, it looks just like the church when I was a little kid. So it's like nothing kind of like shocked me, or nothing like I didn't get that culture shock that a lot of Americans do when they come to an Orthodox church for the first time. And I find people's stories of how they found the church and how they came into the church very interesting. So for everybody listening, the Orthodox Church, obviously it's the oldest church in the world because it's apostolic. But in America, it's in its current, I would say, current incarnation is rather new. It's definitely it was I think statistically speaking, it's the 24th largest church, right? But that's if you don't combine Protestantism, right? Because sometimes when you talk about, like, people say, oh, the largest denomination is Protestantism. Well, that's not a really fair way to count, right? Because there's something like 51,000 variations of Protestantism, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know, do you count like the church down the street that does like TED Talk type, services, or like the African American Baptist church, with the cool hats and the soul singing, right? Those are not the same church, okay? They're liturgically completely different. Well, aliturgical, but they're completely different churches. But if you were to combine Protestantism, you combine those numbers. Realistically speaking, though, I don't think that is a fair statistical way to put it, right? But anyways, the actual, I have this picture here for you guys at home. This is a church in Alaska. It's actually one of the oldest Orthodox churches in the United States. It's obviously been probably rebuilt a few times, but the Orthodox Church arrived in America, and I'm talking about America, not the United States, but America, right? In about 1794, all right? And it actually came through, from to Russian Alaska. So the Russians came in Alaska, and they started preaching to the Native Alaskans, right? To I'm not even good at pronouncing the names, right? But to the Native American Alaskans, and those guys converted really fast, right? And of
Yeah.
course, you had a
Actually,
story.
if you sorry to interrupt, there's a
Good.
documentary about this called Sacred Alaska. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen it, but I actually like just came across it and I put it on my desktop to watch sometime in the next few
Yeah,
days. So
that's worth a watch
yeah,
for sure. It's about the Russian saints evangelizing Alaska, so that's worth a watch.
right. So the story of them evangelizing to the Native Alaskans wasn't originally the first settlers, European settlers into Alaska were Russians, and they were like doing the fur trade and like lumber or something like that, and they weren't very nice. Okay, they weren't none of this nonsense like in that they were in any way different than the interactions between Western Europeans and Native Americans. It was actually quite crappy. And when the initial Orthodox missionaries came to Alaska, they were very upset about the treatment of the natives from the Russians, and they even went back to Russia to complain and try to like change the way they were being treated. They ended up coming back, building churches, and it's a very interesting story. And I recommend everybody look into it or read about it because it was a conversion story that was very different than a lot of other conversion stories when it comes to a old world meeting the new world, where there wasn't a lot of forcing. Basically, the native Alaskans, their local traditions and their local like spiritual beliefs kind of like presaged orthodoxy in a way. So when they met the priest and they started hearing the gospel and stuff, they're like, oh well, that makes sense. So they kind of just slid right into it. The other thing that the Russian Orthodox did not do is they didn't force upon Russian cultural traditions on the natives, right? So when you had, like, for example, Protestant missionaries going to Hawaii, they shoved all the Hawaiians in like little Dutch suits, or they put the natives in like outfits that look ridiculous in the native land because it's hot and miserable, right? Or you look in California, in the California Roman Catholic mission system, you basically took these natives that were fishermen, and they were like living in the islands off the coast of California, and they put them in the mission system and put them in like Spanish clothes, and it created it wiped out their culture completely. The Orthodox up north did not do that. They basically integrated Orthodoxy into their religion and into their cultural practices. And even today, if you go up there, they have like some symbolism, some old like pre-Christian symbolism that they've basically baptized into Christianity without taking upon its like pagan elements, basically, because they're like, oh well, we're going to do this. So like, for example, they do these things called spirit houses, which in their graveyards they would build these little like houses on their graves, right? And before Christianity, they would basically say, oh, the soul of our ancestors live in these houses, and we go pray to them. And post Christianity, they still have the spirit houses, but they treat them in a way like they venerate them as icons. It's almost an iconographical kind of like system where that's where they go and pray. They pray for their ancestors. They pray, all this kind of stuff, right? Now, I bring this up because the reason Alaska is important is because I go to an OCA church, right, which is an Orthodox church in America, and I think you go to one too, right?
I go to an Antiochian parish.
You go to Antiochian church, which has a little bit different history, but
Yeah.
The Orthodox Church in America came through that Alaska kind of thing. Eventually, once Alaska was sold to the United States, the church moved down to San Francisco. From San Francisco, it eventually moved, the headquarters basically moved to New York City. And it basically kind of caught up with the rest of the old world Orthodox churches due to immigration, right? Basically, that multiple, different missionary type, elements, right? Different missions from whether it's Romania, the Serbs, the the Bulgarians, right? They immigrated to the United States and they brought their church with them, right? And eventually a lot of these churches mixed, right? And they also kind of stayed separate because they answered back, because that's where their, the finances and the leadership came from. And the OCA basically was part of the Russian church up until, I believe, until the Russian Revolution, right? Mm-hmm. And during the Russian Revolution, the Patriarch of Russia, he basically released all, and correct me if I'm wrong, historically speaking, anybody, right? He basically released all the churches to be kind of independent because he knew better, because he knew that the Russian Orthodox Church was going to be slammed down and suppressed by the Soviets. And the Russian Orthodox Church in America kind of became its own thing for a while, until later on, where the greater Russian church said, okay, you are your own church now. You're an autocephalous church, right? And politics happened, eventually, blah, blah. Soviet Union collapsed. The Russian Orthodox Church continues. And then the Orthodox Church split into still Russians that still do their own thing, but also the OCA, which is the American church. And here we are, right? But we still have all the other different Antiochians, the Greeks, all those guys, right? And I think we're working through it, right? We're trying to decide what the best way. I think in 100 years, it's going to look very different, right? You know what I mean? Because we're going to come to a situation where there's going to be no more Greeks in the Greek Orthodox Church of America and no more Russians in the Orthodox Church of, but ultimately, right, it's been here in America forever, right? It just has been a minor religion. And right now we're experiencing a massive amount of growth. Are you familiar with that Ancient Faith podcast they did maybe a month or so ago?
Which one?
So there was on October 17th, there was a Ancient Faith podcast with Father Damick and a bunch of kind of ethnographers and data scientists from an institute, and they were basically analyzing the huge growth in the Orthodox Church, right? And in the last few years, so I'm going to read you some stats, right? Because they've come up with that, right? We've had a massive surge, and this is something that we've seen. I'm sure your church has seen a surge of converts, right?
We have, for sure. Actually, my church is we're in a college town, so we're in a little bit of an odd situation because we have a lot of college students come to church at our parish,
right?
And we have a lot of college student converts, which means we have a lot of turnover because they graduate and then they move somewhere else. So it's like we see a ton of catechumens. I don't know how many catechumens we have right now, but it's a lot. It's like, I don't know, it might be a third of the parish, right. But yeah, it's a lot.
We're very similar, but we're a military town because we have all these military bases here, and we have a lot of people that are stationed. They find orthodoxy, they become catechumens, they become baptized or chrismated, and then of course they get orders somewhere else in the military, so they leave and they have to find churches somewhere else. And so we do have that turnover in the same way that a college town would have. Right.
Yeah.
So on this podcast, what they were talking about, and it's a long podcast, and they're talking about that Deacon Seraphim, who's one of the data scientists or whatever, right? He says that we've had two recent surges of converts, inquirers, and catechumens, right? And the first surge happened around the time of COVID, which I think that, that's a lot of people. That I think that a lot of people during the era of COVID started realizing that, a lot of the issues that we're having as a country, as in the world, is not an issue that we can fix with science, with materialist. It's not a materialism problem, right? It's not a scientific problem we can solve. That a lot of the things that ail us as a people is actually of a spiritual nature. So you had a lot of people go into, you know, go seeking faith, right? Whether it's Christianity or some people gone into Buddhism and that kind of stuff, right? But I think there was a huge outburst, right? I think I said this in my, I said this in my writing from before, from yesterday, that when I was in my 20s, right? When I was in my 20s, and this would have been around 2003, 4, 2004-ish, every single one of my friends, like my entire like milieu, my entire friend group, close friends and distant acquaintances and stuff, they were all atheist, right? It was just an assumption that you were a materialist atheist, right? And this led into the era of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, the pre-Reddit atheist era, but everybody was an atheist, right? Like I would have been like I would have been shocked. I would have been shocked if I would have met somebody that was, that was a Christian, right? And the only people, and of course, I was in California, Southern California at the time, right? But as a Californian and kind of a material atheist world, I didn't meet any Christians, right? And the Christians that I did meet were the occasional Protestant, kind of a prosperity gospel mega church kind of goers and stuff, usually of the older generation. So the older Gen Xers, younger boomers were the only like Christians I knew. And fast forward to 2025, and I can't think of anybody I know that is an atheist anymore, right? Um, I would go, I look in my Facebook because, I still have a Facebook that I've had since Facebook came out. And all my old friends, they're posting Orthodox stuff or Protestant stuff. And, everybody's kind of found a kind of a spiritual thing that they've gotten themselves into. And a lot of it started, I believe, during that COVID era. And you could see it on the internet because what happened to the internet atheists? Do you see any more of these guys?
I mean, they're around. I only see them because I watch Orthodox guys debating them, which is like, and I mean, they're all terrible. Like, I don't know if you've kept up with. I used to watch Matt Dillahunty a lot when I was an atheist. Right. That guy is just. I mean, he went off the deep end.
Right. I mean, even guys like terrible. Richard Dawkins are like, "Oh, I'm a cultural Christian now,"
Yeah.
And it's like, what's going on now? Like they used to be on top in the debate circles and everything, used to have these guys, and now it's everybody's like, I mean, yeah, like Jay Dyer like finds one that crawls up from under somewhere, but they're so pathetic, like yeah. I never understand why I don't understand why anybody goes up against Jay Dyer. Okay. Yeah. All right. Like, yeah. You might not like the guy, you might think he's a jerk or whatever, but the dude can debate. Okay. I would never, like, you watch the guy debate for 5 minutes and he's just a monster.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Wilson, but he had a live debate with Matt Dillahunty that was like just total embarrassment. It's like these guys just embarrass themselves.
Right. It's like it's it's just gone, like the whole era. And these guys were on top. And nowadays everybody is some kind of a has kind of abandoned materialism. And I think COVID had a huge kind of like a huge effect on that. And it was kind of like one of the key elements, because it was basically, here is the world of materialism, and it's a world of masks, and the people that are teaching us this materialism cannot even follow their own rules, and I think that,
and actually I think the reason that those internet atheist types looked good against Christians of the time, quote unquote Christians of the time, is that they were most often going up against Protestants for sure, and usually like the more non-denominational evangelical types,
Right.
like the types of Protestants that don't really have any philosophical grounding or
Right.
training, and they don't have like, they would basically, they were almost arguing from a materialist perspective against these atheists who are materialists, and like they were arguing against them on their own terms. And
Right.
the guys that are the Orthodox guys that debate them now, they just don't grant that. Like they're like, no, I'm not going to grant you uh, your worldview, and like, or I'm not
Right.
going to grant you evidentialism. Like, you ask me what's my evidence for God. I'm going to ask you what evidence is, and why should I follow evidence? Like,
Right.
how did you
Exactly.
determine that?
Right. Right.
I didn't
And,
discover any of this stuff until after I became Orthodox, but it was kind of it was a real game changer to start thinking about it that way.
right. Absolutely. When you start like understanding that, I always like, I remember I used to like watch debates between like Christopher Hitchens and those guys. And it was really cringy because they were so out of, just mismatched. It was like the US versus Venezuela. Basically, these guys were usually heavily college educated, well read in Platonic, Aristotelian like philosophy, and modern continental and philosophy. And they would just run circles around these guys who were usually unprepared youth group winsome kind of Protestants, and these guys just cannot keep up with them. And now you have kind of a reverse where you take your kind of like angry atheist and you put him against Jay Dyer, and Jay Dyer just demolishes them because the guy knows everything about everything. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's so interesting to see that, like, that cultural shift.
Yeah,
It,
my daughter's godfather has a story he likes to tell where he was when he was in college, he was an atheist, and he was like president of some atheist club on campus or something like that. And he likes to tell about how he met an Orthodox priest one time, and this was like when he was coming out of atheism. But he met this Orthodox priest and started coming at him with all these atheist arguments that work so well against the Protestants. And then the priest ended up just being like, well, we don't believe that. We don't believe that. We don't believe that. Like, we don't believe any of the things that you assume we believe. And that kind of made him pause. And he was like, wait, hold on a second. You don't believe all these things that Protestants have always told me that they believe? And he was like, no. And that's how he ended up getting into Orthodoxy. But yeah,
right.
it's just a completely different perspective that they're not prepared for.
Right. And I think that, like, during the era of COVID, which was the era of kind of the revelation of scientism, and for you guys, I'm sure you've heard the term scientism. It's a derogatory term towards the idea that, trust the science is just a, modern contemporary religion itself, right? That it's not anymore, materialist or evidentiary than, for example, a mystical religion is, right? And I think you saw that in a way that this curtain was lifted when people saw, like, the constant contradictions, the constant nonsense, and people were saying, no, trust the science. But then the science was, a bunch of high school kids playing, their instruments, their woodwind instruments, through holes in their masks, right? And we're supposed to trust that science. How absurd is that? Or how, like, we're trusting the science, but the germs don't work if you're sitting down and eating at a restaurant. They only work if you're standing up waiting for something, right? You know what I mean? Or all kinds of, like, just ludicrous things. And you basically realize that, like, it is a religion. Scientism is a religion, and I think a lot of people realize that, and they lost, I would say, a fundamental faith in that materialist religion, because it just does not answer the questions that are needed in a situation like COVID. And the political and kind of regulatory elements of COVID were birthed out of the scientism, and a lot of people rejected it. And when they rejected it, they looked for answers, and they found different churches. But according to the data, right, that first wave of converts in the COVID era was very much it was very much males, right? A lot of males, younger males, came in that initial kind of wave, but it never stopped, right? It wasn't like COVID happened, a bunch of Orthodox male, young males converted to Orthodoxy. No, it kept on going, and it keeps on surging, right? And the current influx, which I actually, can vouch for from a perspective of a somebody that goes to church every Sunday or 7 times a day. Basically, I feel like I live at church now. I go to like Vespers, and I go 5 times a week, right? I was actually at church today. The new kind of demographic that's converting right now is actually families. Most of our converts, most of our catechumens are a husband, wife with children coming into the church, or a young couple coming into the church, right? And the demographics are about 25%. And then this is according to all the data they've been doing. It says about 25% former Roman Catholics, which my wife would fit into that category, 50% former Protestants, and 25% atheists, non-church, no church affiliation, right? But it seems that the growth is not so much in younger men right now, it's mostly in families, like late 20s to early 30s families, which kind of matches my on the ground reality that I'm seeing, right? So the other thing that we're seeing, right, is that there's an increase in interest and conversion of Orthodoxy in younger generations, right? For example, statistically speaking, 1% of Gen Z identifies as Orthodox, as opposed to 0.5% of Gen X, right? That's a big jump, right? And data from colleges, right, over the last 5 years show that there's a 0.5% increase in college students identifying as Orthodox, while Protestantism has decreased by almost 6%. Now, it's a key element to realize that we're talking about vastly differing numbers, right? Because there's obviously a lot more Protestants than Eastern Orthodox in the country by far, right? Especially when you add all the Protestant denominations, right? But so what we have the numbers I find interesting right now, and the numbers that some people are finding alarming, right, are that, for good or for ill, right, are that the conservative estimate, if we're keeping the same trends, if we're, has not leveled out, the trends have not stopped since COVID, right? The conservative estimate projects 2.77 million Orthodox Christians by the year 2040, right? And that is a 69% increase. The moderate estimate projects 3.5 million, which is 115% increase, right? So according to them, to maintain the current density, right, that would require the Orthodox churches in America funding between 1,300 to 2,300 new parishes in the next decade, right? That's a massive increase, right? And I think that once we get that huge amount of converts coming in, we're going to be looking at a church that is demographically different than what we are in today, and what I would say, your older Greek Orthodox immigrant or Russian immigrant from 30 years ago will know. You know what I mean? Have you ever heard these numbers?
Yeah, I think I've heard similar numbers. I'm sure they came from the same places they were talking about on this podcast, but yeah.
Right. So one of the conversations we were having, and this is where we're going to go into the history element of it, right? The American history element. of it, right, is that with these new converts and this kind of growth, we're going to start seeing a lot more Americanisms in the Orthodox Church, right? And there's one of the criticisms, and I'm sure you've seen it online, and you probably have seen it in you know in a in a in person also, right? Is that uh, especially with the very very right wing, like kind of like the pagan bros and that kind of stuff. One of the big like arguments against us is that America is not an Orthodox Christian nation. America is an Anglo Protestant nation, and um, you know you don't belong here. Go away. It's never good. It's never going to be important. It's not American, and you know it, it's that's a hard thing to. It's not a hard thing to debate, but it's definitely something that we do have to address, right? Because we've all probably experienced that. You talk about, oh yeah, I go to church. Well, what kind of church? Oh, I go to Orthodox church, and people go, huh? You know what I mean? You probably had that event, right? You're like,
Yeah.
is that like a Orthodox Jewish thing? You're Jewish? Oh, right?
Well,
Or
that doesn't happen so much anymore.
it
Like
doesn't.
it used to be that way 5 years ago, but I don't think it's. I mean, I think with the growth plus the popularity online, I think a lot more people know what it is now, at least.
Right. Right. That's true. I mean, 20 years ago when I was a little kid, people say, "Oh, were you baptized Roman Catholic?" I'm like, "No, no, I was baptized, Catholic Orthodox." And they're like, "I never heard of it." Like it's something that like I never even like brought up ever because nobody would hear about it unless I was hanging out with like some Russian dude I met or something like that. But for the most part, it was just you just don't, it's like explaining to them like Sarmala from Romania, just like you have to like start at baseline zero to even explain it. But yeah, so we do have to kind of answer these questions though, right? Like, are we, I mean, I don't know, was it like 2, 3 months ago that the New York Times actually did an article on American Orthodoxy and the huge growth of Orthodoxy? So it's growing, and the New York Times has taken notice, right? Of course, it was a
Yeah,
hit.
was that the hit piece on
It was
Father
a hit
Moses?
piece. Yeah, it was a hit piece on
Yeah,
Father Moses, right?
yeah,
Um, but those guys are taking notice, right? And it's interesting, right? So in our in-person conversation, right? Not you and I, but friends and stuff like that. We were talking, and you know, the topic came up of, well, how do we make it more American culture? Should we make it more American culture? Should we bring in more Americanisms into the church? And you know, of course, the topic came in is like, well, what is American culture? That's where we had a hard time, kind of deciding, right? Because the America has a culture, and there is an American culture, but American culture is very much, it's very much different based on regional areas. The South is very different than the North, and Appalachia is very different than even the Southeast where I'm at, and Florida is like its own thing, and then California is California. We have very different cultural kind of currents in this country, and then we have some similar things, but what can be in a way baptized by the Orthodox Church in America? And how do we answer, those pagan bro or those like super hardcore American Christian Protestants saying that we're foreigners and we don't belong here? How do we answer those questions? What do you think about that as a historian of, American culture?
Well, I would start with the assertion that America is a Protestant nation. I actually wrote an article about this on Substack not too long ago. Um, I heard, I don't know if you're familiar with Orrin McIntyre. He's like a
Yes, I'm
political
familiar with him. Yeah.
commentator on YouTube. I like him generally on politics, but he was talking about this in a stream, and he's like, America is a Protestant nation, and it's like, he's talking about becoming more Christian, like because America is increasingly secular or has become increasingly secular. but he's talking about how we need to become Christian again, and that needs to be Protestant because America is a Protestant nation. And so I wrote an article about this, um, basically like separating, because there's actually two claims there. There's America was founded as a Protestant nation, or sorry, not two claims, three claims. There's America was founded as a Protestant nation. America should be a Protestant nation, or America is a Protestant nation now, and America should be a Protestant nation going forward. And that should does not follow from the founding, right?
Right.
It's like, so like this is the debate, I guess. This can be easily dispensed with logically, right? Like just because we were a Protestant nation at our founding, if you grant that, you still have to justify the claim that we should be a Protestant nation. And no Protestant would make that argument for a pagan nation, right?
Right.
They
Right.
wouldn't say, well, Norway was Norse pagan, therefore they should stay that way. They're like, no, they would want to convert them because Christianity is the truth and paganism is not. Well, that's our same perspective. It's like if we believe that Orthodoxy is the truth, and we do, we don't want just because our nation was founded on a religion that is in error, we don't want it to stay that way just because it was founded that way.
Right.
So that's what I would start with.
Right. And I agree with you. When people say, well, your ancestors were pagans. Okay, well, yeah, 2000 something years ago, maybe my ancestors were pagans, right? But 2000 years of my ancestors were Christians. So which ancestors do I pick? Do I, at that point, you technically have three separate groups of ancestors to look at, right? You have your pagan ancestors who you can say, well, they just weren't aware. Then you have your pagan ancestors that converted to Christianity.
Yeah, those are the ones I choose to follow.
Right. And then you have your Christian ancestors that were always Christians, right? So 2 out of the 3 groups are Christians, right? So I think I'm going to follow those guys because they, discovered the right thing, right? If I go back far enough, some of my ancestors probably, performed human sacrifice, or I'm Romanian, so my ancestors were Dacians, right? Dacians, and they used to throw their firstborn children in pits of spears to see if Zalmoxis was pleased with them or not, right? And if you died swiftly, it was a good thing. If you died painfully, it was a bad thing, right? So yeah, I'm not doing that with my kid, right? Or myself. I'm not going to throw myself into a pit of spears to please Zalmoxis. So I'm kind of going to go ahead and follow the ones that did not do that, right?
Yeah.
Like the ones
that
moved on from.
With the pagan bros specifically, it's like, if you want to talk about honoring your ancestors, like, why are you going back to, your ancestors in Norway in the 9th century or whatever? Like, your immediate ancestors, like your grandfather and your great grandfather, were probably Christian if you're American,
Right.
So it's like, why are you skipping over a bunch of generations to get back to the pagan ones?
Yeah, like 30 generations, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to go. It's because you're skipping to the ones that are easy to honor because you can make up what they believed.
Exactly.
As opposed to, having to deal with ones that you actually have written and, understanding of what they actually believe. So it's kind of a cheat, right?
Well, yeah, and it's because that's what fits their desires. Like
right.
It's about rebellion. Ultimately, it's like, I don't want to submit to the church, so I'm going to make up my own thing that fits my own preferences, and I'm going to justify it by claiming that I honor my ancestors.
Right. All right. And then you have the obvious thing, which is, well, Christianity was actually very foreign to Europe, when it first got to Europe, right? And it got there in the 1st century, but, it was a foreign religion to the Romans. The Romans adopted it very early on, and they did it. And the Romans also adopted all sorts of religions from all over the world, or all over the known world at the time. That's why you had Romans worshiping Isis and following all kinds of chthonic cults in Rome. and all kinds of crazy stuff from the Middle East. And when the Romans converted to Christianity, those early Christians in Rome were very similar to how we are in a way, right? I like to look at, like I said, I'm very interested in the idea of early Christianity because early Christianity feels very much like current day Christianity, at least how I feel. And you know what I mean? Where we are kind of a separate group theologically and ideologically in a world that is very pagan. And you know, I've said this in the past before that like when you meet those guys that tell you they're a pagan and they're like worshiping Thor or Marvel Loki or whatever, those guys aren't the real pagans. Okay, the real pagans that are really really pagan are your kind of materialist transcendental humanists, right? Your Northern California transhumanist, your tarot girl, Wicca girls, and that kind of stuff. That's the real paganism. The people that worship money and fame, and that's the real
Well, and the
paganism.
scientism
The
followers,
scientism falls it, right. That's
like
where the real
they're
paganism
acting
is.
out rituals, like of the the mask wearing thing was a ritual, or the you could name like dozens of them probably.
Right. And Fista always likes to joke around that, America's entering its empire phase, or somewhere in that area right now where we're entering the greater empire. I think we've been in the empire phase for 50 years, but now it's like we're kind of admitting it more than we had in the past. And just like how, at the height of the Roman Empire, they still kind of paid lip service to the Republic and that type of thing. We're starting to move into the just being open about it. But interestingly enough, that's when Christianity started coming into Rome, right? Like Christianity came in the first century into Rome, which is at the very beginning of the Roman Empire. And so I think we're in a very similar kind of position where we are a small church that is growing through Acts, and we're going to be coming up against a lot of problems and a lot of situations that are probably going to be a lot more historically similar to Christians in the early, in the Roman Empire in the early days of Christianity than to, like, say, Christianity in the Middle Ages or the early modern era. I don't know. That's my opinion, historically speaking, right? And in a way, like, our church feels a lot like the early Christian church, at least my personal church. I mean, not the Orthodox church, but it feels like it's a bunch of people that discovered this faith and are wanting to celebrate it together. And as a smaller group separate from the greater community that is still predominantly very Protestant around us. So I think that's a very interesting way to look at it, in my opinion. Right now, one thing, and this is, people that are Orthodox have probably heard this saying, and people that are not have probably never heard it, which is the idea of tradition and tradition. I'm sure anybody that's Orthodox has heard that. Big T, little t. Are you familiar with that? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Okay. So in the Orthodox Church, we look at things as big T, right? Big tradition with a capital T. And those are things that are kind of infallible in a way, right? Like those things are just non-negotiable. They're things that we do. Like, for example, we do the liturgy,
Or like the
we
canon
do
of
it,
scripture.
the canon of scripture. That's a big T, right? It's non-negotiable, not changeable, infallible, right? It doesn't have to be infallible. Those things are fallible, but they're still big T traditions, right? Iconography, that type of stuff, right? And then we have little t's, which are things that we do, which is like, what language we sing the songs in, or how we set up, certain things, decorations in the church, or how we do, like, little things like that, right? And those are little t's, which are changeable, right? Um, you know, one element that I've noticed is, what do you guys call the priest wife in your church?
Well, I've been at a couple different parishes. My current one calls her Matushka.
Okay, that's what
The
we
one I
call
was
her also.
the one I was at before calls her Korea. So
Korea.
two
What
different
language is
languages.
that in? Is that
That's
in?
Arabic.
That's Arabic. Okay,
I think that's more typical for Antiochian,
right.
but because we're, you know, Syrian.
Right.
So
So, like, for example, like, yeah, we call her Matushka, which is basically a Russian word. It means like little mother. And that's a title. It's a small T tradition, right? It's not an official title in a way. I might be wrong, but like, um, and like for example, the Romanian Orthodox Church calls it presbytera, or like, I forgot exactly the
that's a
term.
Greek term, I
That's a
think.
Greek term. The Romanian Orthodox Church calls it preotessa, which means like priest's wife, right?
Hmm.
Different terminology, right? They obviously don't use the Russian word for it, right? They're not going to use a Russian word. So that's a very interesting kind of thing, right? And will that change in the future? I don't know. I think we were joking about that at church the other day because it was like, well, we can't really come up with a good American term for it because they all kind
Yeah,
of sound like,
priestess doesn't really fit.
right. It's got like other cultural kind of linguistic meaning behind it.
Connotations.
You
Yeah.
can say mother, but that tends to imply a much higher like rank than that, So I don't know, it's difficult, right? So for now, Matushka works. Eventually, maybe we'll change it down the line, right? We use rugs that look, Eastern European, the Eastern European style rugs, right? Are those necessary for liturgy? No, right? But that's what we use because that's kind of the decorations. You have the huge arguments about Orthodox churches and domes, right? The architectural elements are constantly like a point of contention, right? And yeah, we can talk about the architecture of churches forever because that's a huge topic, right? But how should our churches look, right? And I'm not talking about the actual liturgical necessities like the directions of everything, but I'm talking about, do we need a dome? Like Russian churches have big domes, right? Well, Romanian churches don't. Not all the Greek churches do. Was
Yeah.
that a liturgical, an actual like religious reason for the domes, or is it because of architectural necessity, right? Well, because a lot of the old Orthodox churches were the architectural knowledge to build taller, non-domed structures, right? Or there were old converted, Greek and Greco-Roman temples.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting point because the church isn't constrained by the culture that it's operating in, right? So like I remember at the parish I was baptized at in Topeka, Kansas, um, is actually in the process of buying new land and building a new building right now. And a while back, while I was still there, I'm in Oklahoma now, but I was in Kansas when I was baptized. But we were having there was a parish meeting where we were kind of looking at designs for the church building, and I made the comment that I think this is just like my preference. This isn't anything that's an argument for the way things should be or anything like that. But I think I like the way that churches look when they look like they're appropriate to the setting that they're in. So like you should look at a church building and think, oh, that looks appropriate to Alaska where it is, or that looks appropriate to Topeka, Kansas where it is, or something like that. So like I don't know if that makes any sense,
right.
but
No,
it's
it
like
makes
it doesn't
perfect
have to.
sense to
If
me.
it's in the middle of Oklahoma, I don't think it has to look like it's Greek. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. It's like we don't need onion domes on it because the onion domes in Moscow have a purpose. It was an actual architectural necessity why they built those onion domes, right? They built them to keep the snow off of it, right? You know what I mean? And it made sense um, for
And
structural
actually,
integrity.
the interestingly enough, the parish that I was baptized at in Topeka, the building that they're in now, they haven't built the new building yet, but the building that they're in now was formerly a Mormon church, and it actually faces west instead of east. So for
Hmm.
people listening, um, Orthodox churches face east because that's the direction that Christ comes from. So when you're looking at the altar, you're facing east, but the one in Topeka actually faces west because that's how the building was set up when they moved into it. So it's
Right.
backwards, but liturgical east in that building is actually geographic west. So that's just
Right.
a point of trivia, I guess.
Right. A point of necessity for the building and the location. Right.
Yeah.
Now, yeah. So that's actually a very interesting point. That's something I brought up too. It's like eventually we're going to start seeing American Orthodox churches that match the architectural design of the location that they're in. I can imagine churches out west looking very much Western, right? Like if you go to like the missions in California and the Roman Catholic churches in California, a lot of the really old ones are made out of adobe, right? They look like adobe, like pink-ish kind of they kind of fit into that like Spanish kind of style that
Yeah.
is prevalent in California. And eventually, I think that, we're probably going to see an Orthodox church on the West. There's probably one already that looks like, an Adobe kind of structure that kind of
Oh, yeah. If
matches.
you go to St. Michael Monastery in Cañones, New Mexico, it looks like that.
Right, because it makes sense, right?
Yep.
Because those are the material and the building like traditions of the area, and that's what works, right? Because architectural design comes out of the land itself. Well, good architectural design, not stuff like brutalism and stuff, but good architectural design is built out of the environment itself, and eventually you're going to start seeing that, right? Now you're going to start. I think that we're going to start seeing a lot of um, Americanisms in our churches, and we see a lot of it already. Okay, like we eat hot dogs, right? You know what I mean? We eat hot dogs and grill, and for our feast days and stuff, and we have pizza and a lot of American food. uh I think that people say, oh, we do a lot of Russian stuff. Well, we do coffee hour, right? Coffee is not really Russian at all, right? Russians don't even like coffee for the most part. They don't do coffee hour in Russia. Okay. um Russians are actually tea drinkers, not coffee drinkers. The big divide in Europe or the world is, are you a tea country or a coffee country, right? Russians fall squarely in the tea culture, right? Like that they have samovars and stuff. Actually, like people would say, like, well, what is the most drank liquid or in a beverage in Russia? People would say, oh, it's vodka. It's actually tea is the most drink. I think Russia falls right below like Japan and maybe England as the most tea drinkers on the planet.
Would not have guessed that.
Um, yeah, they're big on black tea and that kind of stuff. So
Well, I'm a coffee man myself
I'm a
for
coffee guy
sure.
too. I'm a
I think
coffee guy
America's a
too.
coffee country.
Yeah, Romanians are coffee people too. So I'm a
Yeah.
Romanian. We drink coffee. That's kind of our main thing, right? But now the question is though, how American do we want to become? All right. Okay. Actually, I want to roll back because you were talking about the whole America was founded as Protestants, right? Even that itself is not as true as uh, very prideful Protestants would want to believe, right? Or believe, right? Because like a former guest and fantastic writer on Substack, Karis Rides, you know, and also Dr. Zachary Porker just did an entire YouTube series on this that I have yet to listen to, but I have a feeling that I'm going to agree with it. Is that the Protestantism in America at the founding of America is probably very different than the contemporary Protestantism of today, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you immediately will hit a wall if you're a Protestant looking back at the founding of America as a Protestant nation, right? Is you're going to realize that a lot of these guys, their Protestantism was very much more akin to deism than actual Protestantism, right? Um, you look at Thomas Jefferson, for example, and he's one of the founding fathers, right? The guy was not a Christian by any. I mean, there's a reason why Christopher Hitchens loved the guy, right?
Yeah.
Um, if you guys are unfamiliar with Thomas Jefferson, what he did was he rewrote the New Testament of the Bible, right? So he rewrote the New Testament of the Bible where he took out every single miracle of Christ out. So he he rewrote the. Let me rephrase it just in case you guys missed it. Thomas Jefferson, the founding father of the United States of America, rewrote the New Testament, the Gospels, right? And he rewrote the Gospels as completely a miraculous. He took all the divinity of Christ away from it, right? So when a Protestant says, "Oh, this country was founded on," right? Some of the founding fathers weren't even mainline Protestants. They're like something called Unitarians, right? And we can have a whole episode on those guys if you want to talk about that, right?
Oh, I'm going to have a series about that for sure.
Right.
I'm
So
talking about Mormons next, and oh man,
right.
there's going to be some Unitarian stuff in there.
Right. So basically the guys that were like the founding fathers weren't as Protestant as, some of our Protestant YouTubers would like to believe, right? And then once again, we go to the Puritans, right? And the question is, do we want to go back to that?
Well, this is
Right?
complicated, right? When you say America is founded as a Protestant nation, like you have the same problem back then with Protestantism that you do now, which is that there, you know, dozens of different denominations, and there were probably fewer back then than there are now, but still, you had like the Puritans in the Northeast, the Methodists and Episcopalians in the South. Like you have the same problem. So it's true in a sense to say that America was founded as a Protestant nation, but it's also like the term Protestant itself is kind of um, nebulous, because
Right.
there's so many different Protestants that it's not like one unified thing.
Right. So what I think that we have to kind of come to I don't know, the conclusion is, right? Not conclusion, maybe like a discussion is that we have to look at it from, where we are today. You know, we are today in a place culturally, spiritually, that is very, very barren. It's a very dark time. Just turn on the news, look around, look at our culture, look at our divorce rates, look at our abortion rates, look at our crime rates, look at our rates of mental health medication, our just all across the board. We're just not, it's not well, right? And there's a constant yearning for truth. And I believe that the Orthodox Church is truth, and that is the right truth, right? Now, I don't think that we should not be patriotic. I love America. I think America is amazing. That's why I live here, right? But in order to keep America amazing, right, we have to realize like that one, there's some spiritual issues that we need to address,
Yep.
and two, that we have to accept the reality that as Christians, we're not going to die and end up in America. Okay. We are going to heaven. That is our goal. Our goal is the kingdom of God. Right. And we have to be in the same nation as those early Romans, those Romanians, those Russians, those Greeks, all of them, right? Their goal, their destination, their constant striving is for the kingdom of God, not for a patriotic local ideal, right? We can
Yes.
bring that with us, but that is not the goal, right? We're not trying to, and unfortunately, a lot of people of all religious denominations, whether it's pagan, Orthodox, online sometimes tend to be very much, how does this religion serve my ideological, patriotism? And that's a wrong way to do it.
Yeah,
Basically,
it's the
it's
wrong order of
how does my
operations.
patriotism, yeah, it's exactly, it's how does my country serve Christ, not how Christ serves my country. We have to kind of flip it around because
Yeah,
that's our goal.
ask not what Christ or sorry, what's the quote? Ask not what your country can do.
something
I've tried
like
to
that.
translate it to what
The JFK
JFK
quote,
said. It didn't work. It worked better in my head.
Right. But there's a bunch of wonderful things about America, and like I said, I love it. But then there's also a lot of things that are kind of a standard in current contemporary American culture that we have to we kind of have to reject, right? We have to kind of put behind us. For example, right? When we're looking at things about America that we have problems with, well, look, let's I made a quick list. I based it off an article I'll share with you guys. Number one, right? Sexual morality, right? Look at it. Look at the standard baseline sexual morality of the United States, right? The greater culture, OnlyFans, pornography, just the most obscene, like, music and film and that kind of stuff, right? And not only is it, you know, is it misguided and just wrong, but it's accepted. And I'm not just talking about the OnlyFans element of it. In the kind of contemporary cultural sexuality, we have all the confusion, right? This our divorce, our acceptance of like divorce as like a no big deal, complete destruction of the the family. The whole concept of homosexuality and transgenderism, right? Those are all issues that sprung forth here in America, at least onto the
But
world stage, right?
but Alex,
Yes.
Thomas
Welcome,
Jefferson
Fisto.
Hey,
clearly
here. Nice of you to
Thomas
join
Jefferson
us.
clearly intended that free speech meant my daughter would whore herself out on the internet for tens of millions of dollars a year. Clearly.
Right.
Clearly.
Right.
Maybe or maybe tens
Hey,
of
guys.
dollars a year.
Tens of dollars a year. Yes, in my case, tens of dollars per year. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
It is the Black Lodge brothel. That's what
Right.
they've created.
Exactly, right? And then that's one element of contemporary America that we have to reject. I'm sorry, America, but we have to reject your mainstream sexuality, right? For our own spiritual good, for the good of the world, right? The other thing is, and this one, Fisto's gonna cringe a bit, but our arrogance, right?
No,
America's
dude.
very
Yeah, absolutely.
America's a very arrogant country.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. Absolutely. Hey,
right,
we're America. Why wouldn't it be weirder if we weren't?
right. And
To a certain extent.
the Orthodox faith rejects arrogance. All right,
Yeah.
it rejects arrogance because we're supposed to be humble. We're supposed to be humble, right? And that's another thing. Like we pride ourselves in our arrogance, right? And our kind of ostentationness, right? And it's just it's not. It might be an American trait, but it's not an Orthodox trait, and it's going to be like oil and water to him.
Well, I think this is actually a deeper issue, which is that there's an undercurrent in America's identity of rebellion, right? Because our founding is tied to the rebellion against a monarchy. And, we were talking about the Civil War mythology earlier. And I think if you look back to that and think about how the Civil War was made into a war over slavery, it was made into a war for the liberation of the slaves. And what you've seen since the Civil War is that every war we've been involved in has been, at least on a public propaganda level, has been for the purpose of liberating somebody from somebody else. So there's like this undercurrent of rebellion.
Yeah, from something.
Yeah, there's this undercurrent of rebellion and liberation that kind of ties itself into our national identity. And I don't know what to do with that. I mean, it's I don't know how to solve it, but it's a problem that I think you can identify.
Right. I mean, Fisto, right, after we went cold last week, he told me a great story. Would you want to tell that story about the icons? Because it ties in perfectly. Right. Go ahead.
So, I was having a conversation with a catechumen at church. His name is Brandon, lovely gentleman. He has a beautiful family. His wife is from Crete, He is, I believe, of some typical white American stock. He looks like the kind of kid I might have met when I went to college in Ohio. He's got two beautiful daughters. They've been coming to church for probably about 2 months now. And you can you can tell they really care. Like they're really like, this is great. They're always dressed to the nines. Like they're taking church very seriously, right? He's been going to the catechumen classes and the venerating of the icons. We were discussing it, and he says, yeah, that's the one thing that's really giving him a hard time. And I suggested to him, as a fellow American, that the issue of submission is always going to be difficult for us. The idea that we swear fealty to anything and anyone, or even remotely suggesting that there is any power beyond we the people. American arrogance is very much a thing. And I would humbly suggest that, like I said, it would be weirder if we were not arrogant. You don't get a country like America unless you have big dick energy. I mean, you just don't. And it is what it is. Okay. It's fine. I'm not necessarily saying it's good. I'm not necessarily saying it's bad. It's just, that's how we are, right? We're talking about the nature of Americans and orthodoxy, right? We're going to be a little rowdy. Okay. So anyway, thing is, it doesn't mean we have to remain that way or that it cannot be sanctified. So I'm talking to the guy and I'm like, listen, here, hold on.
I hate to interrupt, but the live chat.
Oh no, he can hear you. He can hear you. He can hear you.
Oh what? Wait, huh? I thought the live chat was saying they can't hear Fisto.
No, he was mistaken. He confused you guys' voices.
Okay, never mind. My bad.
Yes, we are very sonorous gentlemen of the old school, so it's fine, guys. But I saw him first. Anyway, so I'm talking to the guy and I'm like, here, hold out your hand. He holds out his hand. I hold out mine and I say, take my hand. My hand is a
And now Fisto died.
Now I can't hear Fisto.
No, he went out. Oh, that Verizon internet. I think is okay. Well, so Fisto, we can't hear you at all. Let me reset you real fast. Say something. Yeah, check your mic. But I'll finish Fisto's story. I'm sure he won't be upset. Basically, the problem is that us as Americans, we have a hard time with submission, right? We have a hard time with, bending the knee, so to say. When you go into an Orthodox church, the first thing you do is you venerate the icons, right?
Yep.
At the end of the liturgy, we kiss the cross and we kiss the priest's hand, right? Those are signs of, in a way, submission to Christ, right? We are showing our, we are bowing down. We're bowing our heads, right? And it's very rough in contemporary Americanism to, I'm not listening to anybody. And after Fisto and I had this conversation, I had the same conversation with my wife, right? She was up hanging out, watching TV when I went downstairs or doing something. And I told her what Fisto said. And she, like she always does, my wife, like I go up to my wife and I mention something and, she like blows my mind with her like insights into stuff. Right. And, my wife
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Sorry.
So I kind of finished the story for you.
Okay.
If you want to
awesome.
Finish it.
No, it's fine.
But I was telling them about my wife, right? So my wife goes,
yes.
She goes, you know what? She goes, COVID was instrumental in me accepting Orthodoxy, right? Because my wife is, she's an American. She was baptized Roman Catholic as a child, but was non-practicing, basically a kind of a atheist light, I guess, an agnostic forever, right? But she was telling me, so my wife, just like myself, was really big into like punk rock and all the kind of alternative like stuff back in the day, and her group of friends that she grew up with were like super punk rockers. Okay. These guys are like the, F the man, down with the system, that kind of stuff. Right. And almost to a T, right. My wife pointed out to me that all her punk rock, F the man guys bent the knee to COVID. You know, they were the ones that, and my wife was like, what? Here's the man. You know what I mean? Here's your chance. You know what I mean? Right? Here's your chance to prove that you're going to resist, you know, the imposition of the government, right? The imposition of the government upon your lives, you know, upon your children's lives. And all these guys were like, oh yeah, cool, man, F the man, punk rock. And then they put masks on their 3-year-olds, you know? And it's like, and then my wife did not do that, right? My wife was like, absolutely not. My wife was so like, I used to be like, oh, I'll just carry a mask in my pocket and put it on when I go to Target. My wife was like, oh, no, you know, like she's like, nope, you know, at all. And we lived in Southern California. So it wasn't like we were doing that in Texas or somewhere where like COVID rules were very lax. We're talking about like, we live in Los Angeles County, you know? So my wife had nothing to do with it, you know? And I think that she saw in that element how fake and gay the whole, you know, punk rock rebellion thing is, because she realized that every human bows their knee, you know, bows their head and puts a, you know, takes a knee to something, right? And if she's going to do it, she's going to do it for the real thing, which is Christ.
Yeah.
You know
Alex, look, during COVID, they didn't sell out, man. They bought in.
They bought in. Exactly. You know, and which goes to my next point, which Jason and Fisto, you guys already brought it up kind of, which is spiritual freedom and political freedom are not the same thing. Okay.
Correct. Not even remotely close.
All right. We are very arrogant and proud of our supposed political freedom, but you're not free. No matter how much political freedom you have, you're not a free person. True freedom is a spiritual freedom. And you can be all about political freedom, but you can be a slave to pornography, to nonsense, to all kinds of degeneracy and sin. Real freedom is freedom from the sins that hold you down. And no government is going to give you that ever. All right. It just doesn't work like that. Right. Because
no, it doesn't. Politics is very much an idol in the United States. And a lot of people are about to get shocked over the next couple of decades as the republic continues the democracy death wobble to empire. That idol is about to get smashed. It's about to get crushed. And it reminds me of the student.
It already has been, kind of.
Yeah. Right. Oh, it already has been. But like in their mind,
like let's be honest. Even when it comes to even when it comes to political freedom, you are not politically free today in any sense that the founding fathers would have understood it. Right.
Right. Absolutely. Right. No, 100%. It's like my student that I had earlier this week. We were discussing world events over Christmas. And she's like, why do we learn all that American government stuff if none of it applies anymore? And I just looked at her and went, that's a great question. And you can see the light bulb pop off. She's like, oh no. I was like, yep. Now you know what the lies are. Congratulations. Go forth and conquer. You know, I mean, sorry. There it is.
Right. So, I mean, we have that. And then, you know, the last thing, and I think I'm going to combine all of them, you know, is look, let's be honest. We have devolved into a culture of greed, of GDP worship, right? Of, you know, number goes up, right? We're always constantly talking about that, right? Like that's what, you know, that, you know, we're the greatest place ever in the world because of the GDP, you know? And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but that's not life. Okay.
No,
like that's the wrong focus. All right. Money is not what we're worshiping, you know? So, you know, you look at things and say, oh, well, the Orthodox Church is not American. Well, you know, yeah, it's not in a lot of ways, because a lot of what America has become is not something I want to be anymore, right? I'm ultimately rejecting that. I want to reject the degenerate sexual morality. I want to reject the arrogance. I want to reject this like obsession with freedom that is actually slavery, right? This reverse freedom, which is like, oh, I'm free to be a slave. Right. I'm free to be a junkie, right?
I'm free to be a slave to my passions.
Yeah. And then I want to reject this focus on financial growth as the goal of life. that there's more to life than GDP goes up. There's more to life than paycheck, there's more to life than my portfolio or whatever, and
Yeah.
I want to, that if those things are what, like, whether we like it or not, those are some core tenets of the American life. And you know what?
Yeah,
I don't
they are.
want that. I don't want that.
I will
Okay.
I will push it even slightly further that way too many people are confused. They've confused America with the machine, or they've confused
Right.
the machine with America. I don't want to live
Right.
as a I don't want to live as a man. I don't want to live as a machine. I want to live as a creature. And in a lot of ways, that is really what we're talking about here, is that colonization of machine culture, that colonization of globalized homogenous degeneracy.
Right.
I mean, that's
Right.
what people think America is, and it's like you said earlier, it's linked back to money, it's linked back to arrogance, it's linked back to all the worst excesses of modern post Enlightenment everything. It's just
Right.
it's ridiculous. Like, guys, that's not even America. That's not even
Right.
America. America is
Right.
the land. America is the people. The America is the culture that those people create living here in this land. It's
Right.
whatever. Anyway.
And so now my answer to somebody that says, "Well, Orthodox Church not American," I want to say, I would say this. This is kind of like what I wrote down in my notes. Right. I think this is Alex's perspective. All right. I think, right. Why am I Orthodox? Because it's true. All right. It's true. I have these sets of problems and these sets of spiritual needs and questions and yearnings, and the Orthodox Church answers them truthfully, at least to my, fallible conception. That's one thing, right? I believe it's true. Number two, right? Yes, the American political system and the historical America was founded on Protestantism or by Protestants, right? But they had it, and they gave us those first 5 points I was talking about earlier. Like, all the bad stuff happened under their watch. All right. And
Yeah.
basically, I think that a lot of these negative elements are tied into American Protestantism, and there's really no separating them. If America was to become Protestant, the Protestant groups that we have would have to go through such a drastic evolution and a reformation again that they wouldn't recognize themselves. Because when I go into, I open YouTube or I walk into a Protestant church down the street, I see exactly the stuff I don't like, which is basically giant screens, music, BMWs in the parking lots, all kinds of stuff that is, kind of a symptomatic of this decay, this cultural decay that I'm trying to avoid,
Well,
and
and the Protestant thing, like, if they want to say America should be Protestant, they're going to have to fight amongst themselves over what brand of Protestant we're going to be, first of all. And then, like, the based right-wing types are going to say, well, we should be the type of Protestant that we had at the founding. But then they still have a problem because, like we were talking about earlier, there were still a bunch of different types back then. So, like, they're still going to have to fight amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to be Puritans or are we going to be Methodists or Episcopalians or Anglicans?
It seems to me that fight only ends with the Mormons winning, because they have a sense of unity and they have all the fucking money.
In a sense,
come on. If we're going to have to be Protestant, okay, well then it's Mormon. Just go to Utah,
truly,
and be honest with yourself about it. Like,
truly, if we're gonna be honest here, Mormons are the true American religion.
That's what I was just about.
Well,
to
that's
say,
my
yes.
point. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we're all gonna say, yeah, that is a purely American, kind of expression of, I'm just going to say religion, because it certainly isn't Christianity.
Yeah, you talk about people who took "you can just do things" seriously. Like Joseph Smith was one of those for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
you could just rewrite.
Yeah,
you could just rewrite Genesis to write yourself into it. That's fine.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah,
100%.
So, to me, looking at it from a European perspective, or looking at European history of the Orthodox Church, the recent European history of the Orthodox Church, right? In a way, I think that Orthodoxy is the right time. It's actually, I believe, it is very, it's good. It's providential, or I don't know. We're at the right time at the right place at the right time right now. It's good that we're small and growing, right? I don't
Yeah.
think it would have been a good thing if we would have become big like 100 years ago, right? Because in a way, the Orthodox Church in Europe, in Eastern Europe, was tested against one of history's greatest evils, which was communism, right? The Orthodox Church
I thought you were going to say
survived.
Islam.
No, no. Well, it was tested against Islam, right? It was
Well, you're
completely
not wrong.
yeah. It was
Yeah,
it
it was both of them,
survived
really.
Islam.
Yeah,
It
it
survived
survived both.
Islam, but that was one of the greatest evils of the Middle Ages, because Islam can't survive the modern world. We talked about this before. As soon as you get an
Oh,
Islamic,
did we?
from into Los Angeles, he's straight in the gay club, and but orthodoxy survived the greatest of the 20th century modern's evil, the end stage of
Yeah.
Progressivism, which is
Yeah.
this the monstrosity of the communist persecutions and everything, and it survived that, and it thrived post communism, and now in a way, because of that, it is adaptable, and it is well equipped in a way. It's been forged out of that, like, kind of Eastern European evil, and it made it into this 21st century with that enemy behind it, right? And it is a lot more prepared to fight the evils of progressivism and materialism than the other denominations, because this new thing we're dealing with right now is turbo communism in a way, right? Which is basically communism without the work ethic.
Gay space communism.
Yeah, gay space communism, right? you know and so in a way, it's here at the right time at the right place, and it can adapt to that, right? So
Yeah.
what I think is that we can be Orthodox and we can be American, and you will see, I think that we will see a lot more Americanisms enter, a lot more small T traditions, right? Like, celebrating Thanksgiving, having, barbecue, and, like smoking beef or whatever. In
My
like
parish, actually, on that note, my parish has had a tradition for at least a few years now of, on Meat Fair Sunday, we have a chili cook-off.
Right. That's exactly.
And it's pretty cool. Like, I guess for people listening, if you don't know what Meat Fair Sunday is, it's the last Sunday to eat meat before Lent. And so we have a chili cook-off every year on that day. And because we're in Oklahoma, we make Texan chili, which does not have beans in it. And because my wife is a Texan, she thinks beans and chili is heresy. So I grew up with beans in my chili, but my wife does not approve of that. So we don't do it.
What's that state where they eat chili with cinnamon rolls?
Cinnamon rolls?
I've never heard of that.
Disgusting. It's probably California
somewhere. I had some friends that they used to eat chili with cinnamon rolls, and I was like, ooh.
Ohio's the one that does it with pasta on the hot dogs.
There you go. But yeah, I think we're going to have that. And I think the reason why, we are so popular in, different people is because I think everybody deep down realizes that these things are things that we need to reject. Our sexual mores, our focus on these freedoms that are nothing but chains, and our focus on financial gain, and that kind of stuff. It's something that we want to reject, and we cannot do it in churches that just don't challenge us at all. We need the fasting, we need the rules, we need all this stuff. You know what I mean?
You know what I want to do? At my parish, we have a very wide open green space, and I'm gonna ask some of the guys next week. But baseball and some gloves, and just throw the ball around during coffee hour. I mean, that's American Orthodoxy right there, right? Throwing the baseball around, guys. Maybe even get a ball game at some point. I mean, how great would that be? Sunday afternoon ball game after church. Oh man, come on.
Right.
It'd be perfect. And that would be purely an American thing. That'd be awesome. The small T tradition.
Right. No, exactly
That's kind
that.
of
So
that's a cool
we're,
idea.
we're going to see that. We are going to see
Yeah.
that, we're going to see that in the very future, because ultimately right now we have to be a little bit alien, right? Because we have to in a way we have to be like those ice baths, right? We have to be a plunge into a rejection of these superficial course, because all those ills, right? All those ills that I outlined earlier, they're not just they're you're right, they're not American. They're the machine. They're the machine that basically has kind of choked out the true deep like core of America, right? And the rest of the world. And those traditions, those like, our destruction of sexual mores, all that stuff, they're not only the enemy of us in the church, but they're the enemies of just normal, normal Americans, right? Because those, they're destroying everything, right? Look at and we talked about Stranger Things last week, right? Stranger Things, in a way, is very sad because it's a show that is obsessed with the 80s. It's a show that's obsessed with nostalgia, right? We know spiritually that things are bad. So our entire media system is nostalgia for things from the past, whether it's comic books, right? Or, Dungeons and Dragons and all games and stuff from like the 80s and the 70s and that kind of stuff, right? That's not a that's a symptom of illness as a culture, right? To be nostalgic for everything in the past. When everything is nostalgia, that's not a healthy world we live in, right? And how do we break away with that? We can't just embrace the nostalgia. We have to move forward. We have to jump in that ice bath and come out on the other side, right? So, that's kind of how I look at it. Like, we need to roll in the snow a bit, get that chill, and realize, get a fresh perspective on the world, and then fix it. Come back and fix. So yeah, I think that's the future. That this church is the ice bath to get us out of this nostalgia pit and this slavery through freedom, which is not a good thing that we
Yeah.
want.
Well, yeah, and when you look at American history and culture, like this has been a struggle for me, especially since diving deep into the parts of American history that I've dove into. There's like a tension between recognizing all the serious faults that we have and also loving your country. And it's like, I think, as we talk about all this orthodoxy stuff and orthodoxy becoming bigger in America, I think there's like a temptation to just reject everything, right?
Right.
And say, well, America's bad. It's always been bad. And we should just reject the whole thing and become something else. It's like, I think that's the wrong approach, but it is a
Absolutely.
temptation. And it's
Yeah,
like,
it's a temptation because it's one of the idols of of the currently dying liberal order. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
well, if it's not going to work, then we just boomer, 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 blow it all up, boomer, boomer, boomer. I mean,
yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's the wrong
No.
approach. And it's like this tension
100%.
between recognizing the faults and also like, I think to seriously try to fix anything, you have to do it out of love. And like you have to be willing to say, like, I recognize all these faults in my country, but I also still love my country because it's
Right.
mine. Right.
Right.
Like I want the reason I want America to convert to Orthodoxy is because I love America and I want it to be good, So it's like it has to come from a place of love or it's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah,
Because
this
you're
is my
right.
home. I want what's best for my home, and what's best for
Right.
home is truth.
Because
Deal with it.
you're right. The exact opposite, right, is the let's destroy everything. Let's completely reject, everything. And it's really a deracinated kind of mindset, which in a
Yeah.
way makes foreign traditions an ideology, right? Which,
Right.
when I say that as Americans, we have to reject certain elements of Americanisms, this applies to, for example, cradle Orthodox Greeks or Russians or whatever, you got to reject some of those traditions because some of them come not from a great place. You know what I mean? They're just as, there's tons of tribal kind of elements that are brought over, hatreds between different Eastern European nations and that type of thing that are just as harmful and, degenerate as, some of the things that we hold dear on our side of the aisle. Right. So that's a very good point. Both of you guys. I really agree with that. All right. I think we've gone on for about 2 hours. I think we're ready to call it. Fisto, before we leave,
Yes.
how was your week, man? You didn't tell us because you came in
Oh,
late.
gosh. Yeah, no. Week has been good so far. We've been back in school. Got a play going on, so that's going to be exciting. We're going to open Friday. That's going very well. We started doing Animal Farm this week with the kids. Chapter 2, got to talk about some of the metaphors and some of the analogies and doing a bit of a deep dive with some of the kids. I'm approaching it from the perspective of, because ultimately it's debate, right? That's the class I'm teaching this semester. And I'm approaching it from, guys, this is not argument. This is not argument class. This is debate class. And if you're going to debate, you have to know your stuff. Otherwise, you're just throwing out opinions. And if you want that, just, go on the internet. So, I've approached it and said, hey, this book is incredibly dense. Like when Orwell mentions the fact that Mr. Jones suffered failure in a lawsuit and lost a bunch of money. I'm like, guys, they're talking about the Russo-Japanese War. That's why the Tsar in the book is so grumpy. Then they're like, wait, the what? I'm like, yeah, go read about that. There's depth in here. There's depth in here that you can go find, and then you will understand all the things. Or like Molly the horse. She's all obsessed with ribbons because she's the nobility. It's the job of the nobility to look pretty, right? So then we could discuss that now. And I think a few kids a few kids perked up their ears. They're like, wait, what? So it's deeper than they realize. Yeah, I'm trying to approach it like that. So anyway, long story short, week has been very good. I'm excited. I'm probably going to be smoked this weekend though, because like I said, it's with the play coming up, it's Hell Week. But what can you do?
What play are you guys doing?
I'm going to leave the title out of it because I don't want to self-dox. But it's a kind of a murder mystery comedy. I get shot twice, so that's a lot of fun. And yeah, we get to ham it up a bit, so it'll be fun. I'm starring it with my wife and then another woman, so it's a lot of fun.
That's pretty awesome.
Very nice.
It's great.
I'm curious now, Fisto. I think you missed the part where we were talking about the internet atheist from the 2010s.
Oh,
and
Christ!
And the online debates. Like, what's your? So we were kind of talking about this earlier, but what's your take on like the debates from back then and like the debates now between the Orthodox online guys and the atheists?
You guys will probably laugh because back in 2010, that was really the beginning of my long atheist phase, and
same for me.
Yeah,
it's all of us.
I completely ignored the online debate because I could just sense the deep retardation. I was like, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't even care. Like, this is not. I have better things to do than, I was going down to coffee shops and hanging out at clubs and getting drunk and like I was out there living my life. I didn't want to argue about I didn't become an atheism so then I could argue about the theology of atheism online. You know what I mean? That's kind of where it was.
You just became an atheist to be free, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to do. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I did it, because I was tired of the endless theological quote unquote argument, which then now, rears its ugly head now that I'm a Christian again. I don't care. I don't want to have anything to do with these arguments. I mean, discussion is fine. Talking about philosophy, that's fine. Or talking about theology and philosophy, all that stuff is fine. Like, yeah, let's talk about it. But I don't want to get into a Bible verse dick waving contest. No. It's the Bible and Christianity and the church and all these things. It is not technique. It is a way for the sick to get well. I want to get well, not argue how many angels fit on the head of a pin. It's just,
right.
That's not what I want.
So making me want to clap right now, because that's perfectly it's perfectly
it's
said,
just it's just such a fucking waste of time. Part of my French. It's such a fucking waste of time. Like, really? I'm gonna write this huge, and it's the internet. Like like I was saying with that one guy who like was really trying to get at me the other day. It's like, who the fuck are you? Like, who are you? You're telling me to go talk to my priest? And like, dude, I don't even. No one on the internet knows you're a dog. I don't know that you're Eastern Orthodox. I mean, did people not grow up in the 90s when everyone on the internet was like a psycho rapist?
right.
Like you're meeting
They
somebody
still
off
are.
the internet, you're gonna die. It's like, guys, everyone on the internet is gonna kill you. So you have to be super skeptical at all times. Come on. Anyway,
Right. Which is, it goes to the end point of my essay I put out yesterday, which is,
it was really good. I'm really glad you wrote that.
Well, thank you. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
if you guys didn't read my essay, one of the main points was that, when we are arguing with somebody, like, like how you can get into arguing with a materialist atheist or whatever, what's really important, and this is when you're arguing with somebody, especially over like dark topics like the Minnesota thing, Charlie Kirk, all that stuff, is you have to realize that these people you're arguing with that say the most obscene, just evil, dark stuff, right? Anger is not what you want to approach it with, right? Well, first of all, you just shouldn't. You shouldn't do it all, but you have to realize that like there's real evil in the world, right? And on the shoulders of on the shoulders of these people, if you can just imagine them, I just imagine like Satan behind them, and they're victims. They themselves are victims of an evil world, right? The woman that was unfortunately killed in Minnesota, right? Anger and hatred towards her are the wrong things to feel. What we need to feel for her is sorrow. We need to be sorrowful that a woman allowed herself, that she was taken over by just evil, in the world, and is dead because of it, and we're supposed to like sadness is the proper way to feel, if that makes sense, right?
I'd say pity, maybe pity.
I think sorrow is the proper word, because sorrow is just like, we live in this, we have to be sad for the world that can happen. You know what I mean? And we have to realize that when we argue with these people, right? When we argue with these people, we are just raising anger in our own hearts. We're raising, hatred and anger in our hearts. We're raising the anger and hatred in them because we're not convincing them, right? We're not convincing them of, when you argue with somebody like that, right? Like how I was wrongly arguing with that person the other day. When you're arguing with them, I thought about it. I stopped and I thought about it like all night. And I was like, nothing I said is ever going to convince her, right? But what I did do is I probably made her angry. I probably made her more hateful, and I made myself more angry and more hateful, and that's bad. Okay. That's just not a good thing. It's not a good thing to raise the anger and the hate in the world. And what does it solve? It's like, I was watching a video by a priest, and I think I shared it. And, the Orthodox Church, for example, right? It doesn't need us to argue for it.
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't need us to argue. It survived 2,000 years. It's going to survive an eternity more until Christ, comes. And it's me arguing and raising the hatred in my own heart. No, what it needs us to do, what we are called to do, is to be as holy as we can, to strive towards holiness, right? So arguing with people online is just not a holy thing to do. It's just a net negative, and it raises the filth and the junk on the internet. So that's why, like, I'm really, it's fun to watch these videos, right? It's fun to watch Jay Dyer pwn the freaking, that's like a very 2000 term that I use, but Jay Dyer owns Protestant retard or something like that, or Jay Dyer owns retarded atheist, or so and so owns this retard or something. That stuff, what, it is entertaining, okay? It's fun, right? But it's not holy. It's not, it's not edifying, right? It's ultimately, in a way, it's it doesn't really change the minds of the people in the debate, right? And when you do it from a place of anger and hatred and that kind of stuff, it just makes it even worse, right? It makes it gross, and it makes it, it just raises, just, I don't know, it just, I think, and then, when you're talking about religion, theology, all this stuff online, and you're getting into, and look, you can open Substack right now and you can see like 70 billion, like, Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Protestant dudes, and they've all got some like AI icon of like an angel with a fiery sword poning freaking the devil or something like that, right?
Yeah,
You don't know who those people are, dude. You know what I mean?
exactly. I
You
think
don't.
I think I think one of the things we need to consider is how to better use discussion online for the purpose of edification. I think about the fact that many of those accounts are snakes in the grass, especially the Laura London account that's kind of started that whole fight. Like,
Right.
there are people out there, guys. No one on the internet knows you're a dog. Nobody knows on the internet that you're a snake. Nobody knows on the internet that you are a demon, right? There are folks out there that, I mean, well, why are they trying to defraud us, or why are they trying? It doesn't matter. If it's not for Christ, it doesn't matter what the goal is. The goal could simply be to just distract you from truth. That by itself
Right.
is enough to warrant a trebuchet straight to hell for this stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
That
So-
distraction thing is real, man. Like,
Absolutely. That
I mean,
that by itself is
I get
enough
into like
to justify.
I get into arguments on notes, on Substack notes sometimes, and I'm like, depending on the person, it's like maybe you can have a real discussion with them, but sometimes it's like,
Yeah,
what
you got.
what should I be
really
doing
quickly
right
when
now
it's-
that I'm not
yes.
doing because of this conversation that I'm just actually super mad about? Like I want
Right.
to
Right.
own this
It's-
person, but like, so for that reason, I've gotten a lot more liberal with the block button.
It's like gooning.
Yeah, man. That's wise.
Like I just need I need
it
to
is.
like
Rage Goonie.
remove the temptation from myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Because you end up caught in a cycle, and you're basically just like spiritually gooning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one
Sorry,
thing that's
just
very
one
important. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Christo.
just one thing I want to toss out, because it relates to what Jason was saying, and then I'm sure it'll relate to what you're about to say. It's useful for us to show other people that you don't have to listen to this, you don't have to engage with this, you don't have to talk to this guy. You can simply say, nope, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And there's a place to help other people, to give other people courage to just stand up and say, no, you know what? I have better things to do. I'm not going to listen to this guy and refute his, Reddit brained 87,000 point post on whatever. No, I just
Right.
shut up, retard. I'm out. Like I'm going to go do something else.
I think there's
edification there.
I think there's a very small number of people who can engage with a serious critic online and actually do it in a loving way, such that the critic ends up like being won over in the end.
Right.
Like I've seen this before, and it's actually amazing to watch. Like I've seen Andrew Wilson do it, where he has a guy come in hot, like criticizing him relentlessly, and by the end of the conversation, by the end of like a 4-hour conversation, he's actually winning the guy over, without compromising on anything. And it's amazing to watch. I don't understand how he does it, and I think there's a very small number of people that can actually do that. I am not one of them, and because I know I'm not one of them, like for me, the correct answer is to like disengage probably most of the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Well, one thing that's very interesting, and I hope people that are listening like understand this, and is that when it comes to religion and orthodoxy, for example, but this I think this is a universal kind of thing, right? It is very, very fun, and it's very tempting to become really, really into the idea of theology and debate, right? Like guys like you and the three of us, right? We're all into history. We're like history nerds, right? Like, I'm the kind of guy that read like the entirety, like, just giant tomes of like World War II history when I was like in fifth grade. That's the kind of stuff I'd check out. And I used to read history magazines about, everything for fun, like stuff that people would find exceptionally boring. I mean, you have a podcast, Jason, about history. This stuff is enjoyable to us, right? I love, I have a stack of theology and church history books on my desk right now. I enjoy watching videos of people discussing theology. I like listening to podcasts about the history of the Orthodox Church and that kind of stuff, right? And it's very easy to be we don't have sermons. It's very easy to become obsessed with that and make that our idol, right? We can make theology an idol, right? And a lot of times the hardest thing to do, we have to realize that like those books and all that stuff, that's only a part of the faith, right? The stuff that really matters is actually going to church and being there, being part of your community. One thing, one thing my priest says is, he constantly points out the fact that you cannot do the liturgy with only one person, right? You need more than one person, right? You can't just do it by yourself. So you can be the most knowledgeable historian of the church and the greatest theologian of the church, but it's meaningless if you don't live the life, if you don't go and participate, right? If you don't venerate icons, if you don't love your neighbors, if you don't love the people around you in your church and in your community, right? All that stuff like ultimately can become an idol, right? And it's very important for us to realize that we have to say, hey, that's why I personally think when people like like newer people that are interested in orthodoxy, for example, and go, hey Alex, I'm gonna come to your church, what book should I read? I go, don't read anything, just come, just come, dude. You know what I mean? If there's a book to read, it's the Bible. Here's the Orthodox Study Bible, the best Bible there is. It's actually fantastic. It has great notes in it. But just go to it, right? Go to it, go be there, go to liturgy, participate, right? And I honestly think that once you go to liturgy and you're going consistently for a few months, everything starts to click into place, right? Everything starts to click into place and everything makes much more sense than if you were just to read. And then you can go back and read and everything's like, oh, I see. Oh, I see. You know what I mean? And I witnessed this with my wife, for example, when she started coming to church. At first she was overwhelmed. Okay. And for you guys that have never been to an Orthodox liturgy, it can be overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of moving parts. And there's so much to learn because Orthodoxy is a very wide and deep ocean, right? And when you wade into it, at first it can be overwhelming and you're like, what am I doing here? What's going on?
Yeah.
Where are these guys kissing icons and lighting candles and they're doing this and they're doing that and every little thing,
God, chance.
yeah, everything on the walls has a meaning. Everything, like the censer the priest holds has meaning, right? The different like things hanging from it, everything has a meaning. The color of the robes change, per the liturgical calendar, and they have a meaning, and the icons in the center of the church change, and there's different flowers that are added to the liturgy and to decorate the liturgy and that kind of stuff. There's so much, and it can be absolutely overwhelming, right? So what you have to do, I think, is you just have to do it, and then you read about it, then you get into the theology, right? Because if you just read books about it or just watch Jay Dyer videos and stuff, it's ultimately it's not going to guide you properly because it is a participatory religion.
Yes.
If you read Zachary Porker's great book Journey to Reality, one of the things he opens the book, and it's one of the things that I love about his book, is he talks about how Christianity, Orthodoxy, is not about a book. All right. We are not worshiping a book. We are not worshiping a book that gives us instructions. We are worshiping a man, a man that is God, right? We're worshiping Christ. Our religion is about Christ, and it is about participating in the life of Christ, right? So books are great, but they come secondary to the, the liturgy, the meaning, the everything else, right? And when we approach, orthodoxy or religion as a debate forum, right? Where we're like, oh, well, it's the right religion because I won the debate, or that are you really into the religion, or are you into winning a debate at that point, right? Or
Yeah.
are you attracted to the combat? You know what I mean? The verbal debate combat, and is that what you want to base your life on, right? The religion that won the debate, I don't think so. I think that's kind of a improper way of approaching spirituality,
Yeah. I have people in my life that, close to me, like friends and family members that I've talked to about Orthodoxy since I converted. And at the end of the day, it's like, I run them through all the arguments that we would use as Orthodox to talk about God, demonstrate how we know that the Orthodox Church is the true church. And then at the end of the day, like more and more lately, I've come to the conclusion that, like, I can give you all these arguments, but really you need to go to liturgy and do it.
Right.
Like that's it. Like, because whatever I can tell you, like it's another game changer for me when coming into the Orthodox Church was the concept of the noose and how it can be clouded by sin. And it's like, your spiritual faculties, the noose, can be corrupted by sin to the point where you are not actually able to comprehend arguments correctly,
Right.
So, and the only way to fix it is by going to the spiritual hospital, which is the church. So at the end of the day, you just have to go to liturgy. Like, that's really all there is to it.
Right. Because I've come to that same conclusion, right? Which is, people go, oh, so you go to Orthodox Church? Well, tell me about it. Well, and then I can get into like all the stuff, and I can show them, I don't know, Jay Dyer videos or something, or give them the books, right? Like, your two standard introductory to Orthodoxy books by the Orthodox way and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, that doesn't really capture the essence, right? You know what I mean, of what we're dealing with here, right? What really gets people is they come into the door and they see liturgy, and they see a church full of people, that are like just praising God, worshiping God, and there's families and there's children running around, and there's all this goodness, right? And it's there's a fullness of it, of the experience, that you just don't get anywhere else, right?
Yeah,
Orthodoxy
Orthodoxy is a lot like that band that is always better live.
Right, exactly. And I actually was talking to a friend today at work. I'm off of work, but I went into my office to pick something up because I left a wire thing that I needed for my computer, and I was talking to a friend. He's like, oh, I think my wife and I are going to come to your church on Sunday, right? And I was like, I'm going to give you a warning though, man. If you come, you're never going to go anywhere else. It's going to ruin it for you. Okay. Just so you know, you're going to come, you're going to see it, and you're going to, you might not like it at first. It might be kind of weird. You might kind of, but you're going to go back to the Protestant church you've been going to, and you're going to be right back. So just make sure that when you come, you're ready to stay, because that you're staying, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, it kind of ruins everything else, in a way. Like, I think there's a fullness of it that is just, it's hard to find anywhere else, and I don't know that's the glory of it, right? That's the greatness of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're not going to win.
True.
You're not going to win people over with calling them retarded. I mean, no offense, Visto, but
you might win over some.
Well, to be fair, when you call people retarded on Substack notes, you're not trying to win the retard over. You're trying to win over other people that see you call the person retarded.
Exactly. Right.
And like that's
Yeah.
that might be legit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what
I mean,
Like,
it
you
just
shouldn't.
it flows into the whole. You don't have to engage with this people.
Right.
You don't have to engage
No,
with this stuff.
I fully understand.
Nonsense. Like especially when it comes to the really toxic stuff, all the liberal stuff, all of the woke stuff, all of the snakes, all of the distract. It is essentially saying, actually, this is probably what I should This is what I should update it to. Shut up, retard. Stop getting distracted.
Right. Well, that's
really what it is.
that's really what it means. It's like ultimately it can come off offensive, but what you're really doing is you're saying this is not worth the time. This is not worth the conversation.
Yeah. Well, someone who like puts their sense of self-worth in their ability to defend whatever madness they have to be screaming and yelling about. Well, yeah, it is offensive. Because it should be offensive.
Not to you. Well, to them. Yeah.
Because I'm saying I'm saying about what you are about is legitimately just stupid. It just stop. Just come on. Just not. And I mean, we don't like to say it. I mean, not that we don't like to say it, but like there is an element, and I like the fact that we had that reading from James earlier this week because I am legitimately a teacher, right? So like, it's harder. It is more dangerous for teachers. It's better to not be a teacher because you don't want to send somebody in the wrong direction, right? I get that. But then for me personally, I am a teacher. Like I don't have a choice in that. So I have to take it really seriously. But sometimes.
Yeah. Didn't we just read that in the epistle like yesterday, I think?
Yeah. It's like 2 days ago maybe. But anyway, thing is, some people, you have to hit them with a haymaker to like break through the crust that's in there. And at least in my own teaching, I can hit pretty damn hard, and I can hit pretty damn consistently where I will get you eventually. You will eventually see what it is I'm trying to show you because I'm just annoying, right? So I mean, it's kind of funny. Like we're legitimately talking about Christ sanctifying shut up retard. Is that a thing? Is that even possible? Like I don't even know, but it's just. How much of America just is literally retarded? And I don't mean that in like a trying to be stupid or insult or anything. It's like what Jason was saying, like you're so corrupted by sin, you legitimately are you're barely anything. If it weren't for God, you'd be nothing at this point. You're just this gremlin rolling through the mud.
Gremlin, like that. No,
I think the way you know is if you demonstrate a contradiction to someone.
Yeah.
Like there's a person you're talking to, they have a contradiction in their thinking. Like you demonstrate like P and not P that they hold in their mind at the same time. You demonstrate that to them and they just don't care. Like that's the corruption, like that's how you know absolutely. That they cannot actually comprehend logic. Like,
I think it also goes away too. Cause like Jason said, the whole shut up retard thing, it's not for the retard. I mean, if they get it, God bless them, but it's for everybody else. And then also it doesn't work if every Sunday I don't fully admit I'm also fucking retarded.
Right.
Like,
every morning,
dude,
every morning,
every morning. I mean, I'm not going to post it every morning because I'm lazy.
Every minute, I actually try to remind myself that.
Yeah.
Like today, I was on one hell of a retarded streak for some reason. I I don't know what it was. I was irritating, and I know what it was. I went to the DNB today. I went to the DNB, and
that's rough, man.
Even though the South Carolina DNV is much better than the California DNV, I was still, sitting there and, just
the hair on the
chalking up
the mention of it.
Just adding things to my list of things I need to confess, thoughts that were just popping through my head, and I'm like, and I'm sitting
Father,
there.
for I have sinned. I wanted a machine gun.
I'm just having one of those days today where everything was pissing me off. Like I was driving towards I had to go to like the tax assessor's office, which was a pleasant experience. And then
why did you do that to yourself, brother?
I had to do it, to get some car tax stuff done because South Carolina has these weird tax laws
Yeah.
on cars that you have to do every year. And then I was driving, and like every single person driving in front of me was driving like I just had a bunch of Ohio drivers in front of me driving like
Yeah,
30,
boy.
like people from Ohio drive like 30 miles in like the 60 mile and like 70 miles in like the 25 mile. It's
Yeah.
like ass backwards. And
I
I'm just
posted,
like,
I posted in the Ohio chat today that everybody in South Carolina should drive really slow in order to give Alexandru the opportunity to increase his holiness.
right.
So you're welcome.
And then
You're
like,
welcome. The Ohio
and then
bros
of course
flipping out.
I'm like stuck behind every like wide load like trailer like construction thing, and it's like then it starts to rain, and it's like, oh my god, and then like I go, and then like I need to go to work to like pick up some stuff for my computer, and like none of the computers at work, and it's just like they're all like they weren't like transferring PDF files that I needed, and I'm just like, oh, just like slowly becoming more and more angry, and it's freezing the cold today, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to Starbucks, and I'm gonna sit at Starbucks, and I'm gonna read my book just to get out of the house because I was irritated the whole time. And I go to Starbucks, and then the girl's like, oh, our indoor is closed because we're having a meeting, so it's going to be closed for like an hour while we have our corporate meeting. So I go outside, and it's like pouring like rain, and it's freezing, and I'm like, I can't even drink my coffee and like just drink water, like I'm just like furious. It's like freezing, so I sit in my car, and I'm like just angry in my car for like 20 minutes, just sitting there. And I came here and did this podcast. So yeah, this whole day is a day of like little tiny irritations, and I was nervous that like the entire like the internet was going to be down, because I know Verizon was down. I know it was down where you were, but it was also down here. And I kept on, I'm like, if Verizon's down, is our stupid internet going to be down too here? And as soon as I logged on, my like I'm upstairs in my bedroom where I record, and I have like one of those wireless repeaters, and I'm just like the repeater stopped working, so I'm connected to like the internet from downstairs, and it just sucks. And my wife forgot to buy coffee. She went to Aldi yesterday and did not buy coffee. I don't know. It's just one of those days, man. One of those days, to quote Limp Bizkit, the prophet of our age.
Woo.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I had an epiphany last
Share.
week. You want to hear about it?
Yeah, it's here.
So you know that we just had Epiphany.
We did, yes.
Yeah.
So I was at Epiphany. I was at liturgy for Epiphany. And I was standing in liturgy. It was a long service because, number one, we had baptisms before it. And then we had Orthodox. And then we had liturgy. So it was like a Monday night. It was like 4 hours of standing in church. It was a long time. So I was standing there, and my mind was wandering all over the place because I'm retarded.
Yeah.
And that's how it goes, right? You know how it goes. Like you're standing in service, your mind's wandering to like 1,000 different places other than the service.
Right.
And so I'm standing there, my mind's wandering, and I go down one of these like mental rabbit trails that last like 15 minutes. And I come back in my mind to the service, and I'm like, wow, I just lost 15 minutes. Like that was 15 minutes just went by and I didn't even notice. And then I'm thinking like, I don't know why this thought popped into my head, but I thought of like, like the military trains people to resist torture, right? Like if you're captured and you're tortured for information, like they train you to resist. Like if you're in a situation like that, you're being tortured, that would not happen. Like your mind would not wander to the point where you lose 15 minutes. Like you didn't even notice that it went past. So then I'm thinking like, why is that? Like, why is it that I can be standing here in church and just not notice that 15 minutes went by? But if I was in the military and I was, captured by the enemy and being tortured for information, there's no way I would just lose 15 minutes, right? I would feel every second of that. Why is that? And then I had an epiphany. It was like, because God doesn't compel your will.
Right. All
Yeah,
right.
God won't torture you.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to go do it. You have to.
It's
It's
because it's because when you're in church, your attention is a matter of free will.
right.
Like if you're not willing to focus on God, God's not going to compel you to focus on him.
Right. No,
That
no,
was my that was my epiphany that I had on Epiphany.
right. That's perfect. No, that's perfect. And it's like, liturgies are the liturgy is long. With our liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom is long, and then we hop into the Saint Basil liturgy sometimes, and that one's really long. And well, what's crazy is the more I go, I feel like sometimes like I have those days where it just feels like an eternity. I'm just like, like this needs to be over. I catch myself having that thought. I'm like, this needs to. And other days I'm there and I look at my watch and it's like, what is it already over? They're already getting ready to do, they're already like done already. Like, I'm like, wow, like it's like 3 hours past already, it's like wild. Right. And it's interesting how we approach our focus. One of the most amazing things I've like witnessed in the last few months is actually my daughter. So at our church we have a lot of kids, right? And they're all about like between, like, we have a bunch of little kids, but then there's like this pack of girls that are like between 6 and 10, right?
I like how you
And
said. I like how you called it a pack.
yeah, well, I call them the church goblins, right? Because they're kind of our gargoyles, but they're just our goblins, right? And their attention span is the attention span of a 7-year-old, and sometimes, like, they like to do stuff like, they get involved a lot. Like, for example, we give them a lot of jobs to do, right? Like, they have to, we've been letting them do that, like pouring the wine, and like giving out the bread, like, the not the communion bread, but the blessed bread for visitors and stuff. And we keep them in charge of that. They blow out the candles they're about to blow out. They have all these little tiny tasks. Like, my daughter makes coffee. She's obsessed with making coffee. So she makes like all the coffee, with an adult, right? Whoever's on coffee duty that day, she goes and helps them and fills the water and, gives them water and stuff. But, I always watch my daughter. And a while ago, like, I used to kind of get irritated. I'm like, pay attention, pay attention, like I would just get kind of like, do the whole 2 fingers to my eyes, point to the front type of thing whenever she was off doing whatever, and, but then I could watch her for like 3 hours and she has not, paid any attention. Right. And then she'll turn around on the way home and she will say exactly what the priest said in the homily, and I'm like, what? Like, and she understands what he was talking about. And I am not even joking, but I'm pretty sure that my daughter could probably recite the entire liturgy from beginning to end, off top of her head. Like, she like has absorbed it like right into her head somehow, and she knows all the prayers and she knows all the songs and stuff. And it's like so crazy, because I would have believed it, but she like absorbed it like a cell, like a cell osmosis,
Yeah.
and she's not even like, if you watch her, like, she's bouncing around, she's holding a baby, she's doing this, she's like making coffee, she's running to blow out candles left and right, or whatever, yet she completely knows everything, and she'll say something like that will just blow my mind sometimes, when, where she'll like will quote like, or like paraphrase like something the priest said during the homily, and I'm like, what? She goes, oh yeah, I remember when Father said this and this, and I'm like, that's so wild, and here I am, I misjudged, her level of attention. And I think that's just the glory of it, right? That's the greatness of liturgy, that like
Yeah.
it has this power. And it's one of these things of like people coming in from a different different denomination and stuff, like, oh, you guys sing a lot, you guys sing so much, right? Well, yeah, the entire liturgy is sung, right? And so much so that our priests have to go to singing classes and they get tested for singing when they go to seminary, right? Which is probably why I can never be a priest, because I have a horrible voice. Like my singing voice, woo, like I think they would like reject me on that ground alone, right? And I just like, the point of the singing is because you can, you can convey so much information on multiple levels, right? It's like the whole angelic choir kind of concept, right? Like you get all these information, and you might not even like think it, like, actively think it, but hearing it in the background allows you to kind of absorb the information. And then you start hearing the hymns and stuff, and the words start popping into your head. And like now, after I've done it so long, like I know exactly what the hymn is about. I know exactly what the song is about. And it's such a cool, like, wonderful thing that's very different, where like everything is a continuous thing. In the chat, Brian, our church is pretty small. We have about, I think, 80 to 140 people, depending on what day it is. On some days we'll have a lot, and give or take people being on vacation, being out of town, and that kind of stuff. It's also very important to people that aren't Orthodox to understand that, very just like the Roman Catholic Church, we follow a liturgical calendar, and we follow I don't know what's called, like a monastic calendar, right? Where we have different, what you would call, services throughout the day. Not all the churches do all the different services, but we have like Vespers and Compline, and different days of the week will have different liturgies. Well, the liturgy is the big one where we do communion and stuff, but we also have non-liturgy nights or mornings, or depending on the liturgical calendar. So like, for example, like we did the blessing of the waters this week. Did you guys do that?
Yep.
Just go and bless some ocean. I mean, I always wonder what do people do when there's no ocean to bless? I guess you bless a pond or something,
You
or
go
a
to a
river.
lake or a river.
Yeah.
Puddle.
Puddle
It's water.
somewhere.
It's water.
We have an ocean, right?
There you
But
go.
different things. This week we're actually doing two liturgies back to back this weekend, right? Because we have a bishop visiting us, so we're going to do the bishop's liturgy on one day, and then a regular liturgy on the following day. And I believe we're doing a bishop vespers with the bishop also on the same day too. So I'm gonna be at church all weekend for sure. That's all I'm doing, guys. No Substack for Alex, just church.
That's good for
So
you.
I know that's good for me. All right, guys, but we've gone at 42 minutes past our bedtime, and I have to wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow, and
good Lord.
I'm gonna go have fun doing that. Jason, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, man.
For all
Nice to catch up
listeners at home,
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.
I'm going to post this episode for everybody to listen, forever. And it's going to be on Substack, on Spotify, Apple podcasts, or all that different stuff on YouTube. And in the Substack post, I'm going to post links to some of the articles I read to kind of put together the topic. I'm also going to link to all of Jason's podcasts and his stuff, of course. And I'll do some links to, I mentioned Dr. Zachary Porku, and also I mentioned what's her name, Karis Rides, and both those Substacks are really worth reading because they're kind of on this topic also.
Yep.
If you guys, if this is your first time listening or just jumping in on last episode, on the post on Substack, I did post a a list of books I'm currently reading, which I highly recommend you read if you're interested in Orthodox Church. If you have questions about this kind of stuff, feel free to hit me up on Substack. I'll answer it. Obviously, with the caveat that I'm not a priest, I can just kind of point you in the direction. If you go, hey Alex, I live in Boduk town, Boduk land or whatever, and there's an Orthodox church here. Is that like a real Orthodox church or whatever? I can actually say yes or no based on, I know the different affiliations and stuff, because it can get kind of confusing. Obviously, if you live in New York or Los Angeles or any of the big cities, you're going to have tons of Orthodox churches to go to, with the caveat that there are different what do we call it? Branches? What
Jurisdictions.
Jurisdictions, right? And the jurisdictions, while we're all in communion with each other, we do things a little bit differently on that little t level, right?
Yeah, you got to be careful with Miaphysites, though. Like when it comes to the Oriental Orthodox, they're not in communion with us, so
right.
it gets a little confusing.
Right. And those are all theological issues that are above my level of discussion.
Yes.
But I can absolutely say, hey, if you go to a Greek church,
Hello?
we can talk about it. What's up, Fisto? If you go to like your church, right? I just mind blanked on it. Then there's the OCA, which is and that
Antiochian.
kind of stuff. Antiochian, yeah, I'm sorry. A friend of mine, actually, I don't know if he's still in the chat. He was in the chat. He went down to Texas and he went to an Antiochian church, and he said it was really interesting because it was in El Paso and they did liturgy in English and Spanish also, because I guess Orthodoxy is becoming popular in the Southwestern Hispanic community,
Yeah, they have. I've visited the monastery in Cañones a couple times, and they have. They'll do things in Spanish occasionally in their services. Right. So yeah,
which I thought was really cool, because he's a Spanish speaker ish, and he thought it was really cool, and he took his family to it, and yeah, so there's a lot of different jurisdictions, and we're at the point where you can pretty much find an Orthodox church everywhere. I mean, when I moved to South Carolina, I was like, yeah, I'm never finding a church down here. And then, well, lo and behold, it was right in my face as soon as I moved here. And I was like, okay, all right. I guess I did not know that there's this huge Southern, Southern Orthodox thing going on.
Yeah, we didn't even get into that. It's like,
yeah, we didn't even get into that, right? The Ortho-Dixie.
Yeah, maybe that's a topic for another live stream.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, guys, thank you for listening. If you guys enjoyed the show, and if you guys enjoy the show, please subscribe.
Actually, can I plug one thing before?
Yeah, plug your thing first.
So, listen to my podcast first of all. The other thing is, my final episode of this current series about Civil War, Kansas and Missouri drops tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. I'm going to be doing a live Q&A for that on Saturday, January 24th at 7:30 Central Time. So if you're able to make it for that, especially if you listen to the series, check my Substack for that. I'd love to have a bunch of questions in there to be able to answer. I'm going to be co-hosting it with a friend of mine, so it should be a good time. So Saturday, January 24th, 7:30 p.m. Central Time.
I'll probably be there myself. Unless I'm at church. I might be at church.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you guys enjoyed the show, absolutely go to Jason's and listen to his whole series and his upcoming stuff. It's fantastic. The one thing that for you guys that are new to this podcast, one thing me and Fisto do not do is we don't shill. Okay. Everything I share on here or I talk about, I read it. I listen to it. I support it. So any author I've ever had on here, any podcaster I've had on here, unless we're just here to debate, which I never do that really. I fully support their work. That's why they're here, because it's people I usually come across through conversation or I find interested. I'm like, hey man, I really like your stuff. Come talk to me about it. Right. And that's how I met Jason. So I support everything we have on the show. So please go and do that also, because we're supposed to support each other in our small community of, creators. I hate that word though, right? Of authors and historians, and it's kind of breaking away from the mainstream, right? Also, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. And yeah, I would love it if you subscribe to the paid option, because I got to pay my bills, so Fisto's internet doesn't go out. But also just subscribe even to the free option, and please like and share, and please subscribe not just to Substack but to the YouTube and like Spotify if you have it, because all those little likes matter, right? It raises the algorithm, it feeds the machine likes it, and then I like to be like a virus in the machine, right? I'm trying to become like an infection in the machine, right? And that's what we're trying to do here. But for the rest of you guys, good night, and had another wonderful time. Thank you, Jason. Fisto, I'm sure you're listening. Thank you for joining us. I'll be late, but you still came in. And good night to all you guys.